The massive Raman warship breaches Earth's atmosphere, its ominous presence looming over New York City. Humanity's super soldiers prepare to join the battle, their arrival promising to send aliens running in fear. Chaos erupts as civilians flee in terror, overwhelmed by the alien vessel's sheer size and otherworldly design. The Raman invasion force, led by Commander Wren, deploys ground troops using advanced teleportation technology. These alien soldiers, possessing superior strength and advanced weaponry, easily overpower local law enforcement and military units. As the situation grows dire, the United Nations convenes an emergency session to address the global threat. World leaders debate their limited options, realizing conventional forces are no match for the Raman invaders. In a secret bunker beneath the Pentagon, General Marcus Steele presents a classified project to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Project Titan, a covert super soldier program developed in anticipation of extraterrestrial threats. The program's lead subject, Stephen Cox, a former Navy SEAL with enhanced physical and mental capabilities, is briefed on the invasion. Cox receives orders to assemble his team of elite super soldiers for immediate deployment to New York City. As Cox and his unit prepare for battle, reports flood in of Raman forces advancing through Manhattan, decimating everything in their path. The super soldiers board a stealth VTOL aircraft equipped with experimental weapons designed to counter alien technology. As they approach the combat zone, Cox receives intel that Commander Wren has established a command center in Central Park, coordinating the Raman assault from there. The super soldier unit's primary objective is to neutralize Wren and disrupt the alien command structure. Meanwhile, the Raman forces continue their relentless advance, pushing back the overwhelmed human defenders. Commander Wren, monitoring the battle from his command center, receives reports of an unidentified aircraft approaching at high speed. As Cox's team nears their drop zone, they witness the full extent of the destruction below. The super soldiers prepare for a high-altitude insertion, their augmented bodies primed for the coming battle. Cox gives the order to deploy, and the unit leaps from the aircraft, descending rapidly towards the alien-occupied streets of New York City. The wind rushes past their faces as they plummet towards the earth, their enhanced vision allowing them to pick out individual Raman soldiers among the chaos below. As they near the ground, Cox activates his comm link. "Remember your training," he says to his team. "We're humanity's last hope. Let's show these aliens what we're made of." With that, the super soldiers brace for impact, ready to turn the tide of the invasion and prove that when humanity's finest join the battle, even the most formidable alien forces will learn to fear the might of Earth's defenders. The super soldiers plummeted towards the Earth, their enhanced vision picking out individual Raman soldiers amidst the chaos below. As they neared the ground, Cox's voice crackled over the comm link. "Remember your training. We're humanity's last hope. Let's show these aliens what we're made of." Seconds later, they hit the ground with bone-jarring force, but their advanced combat suits absorbed the impact, allowing them to roll and spring to their feet in one fluid motion. The team quickly dispersed, each member's augmented muscles and reflexes propelling them through the debris-strewn streets with inhuman speed and agility. Cox activated his tactical visor, the high-tech display overlaying his vision with a wealth of strategic information. He scanned the area, identifying Raman troop movements and mapping out potential routes through the urban battlefield. His enhanced hearing picked up the sounds of nearby combat, the staccato of human weapons fire, mixed with the high-pitched whine of alien energy weapons. "Team, we've got a situation developing near Times Square," Cox announced over the secure channel. "Human defenders are about to be overrun. We're going to change that." The super soldiers moved as one, navigating through toppled skyscrapers and smoldering vehicles. They passed terrified civilians fleeing in all directions, some casting awe-struck glances at the elite warriors sprinting past. As they approached Times Square, the full extent of the Raman devastation became apparent. The once iconic location was now a war zone, its famous billboards either dark or displaying eerie alien script. A makeshift human defensive position had been established using overturned buses and concrete barriers, but it was clear they were fighting a losing battle. Cox signaled his team to spread out and engage. Without hesitation, they leapt into action, catching the advancing Raman forces completely off guard. The super soldiers moved with a speed and precision that defied human limitations. Cox himself engaged a Reman soldier in hand-to-hand combat, his augmented strength allowing him to match the alien's superior physique. The Raymond swung a massive clawed hand at Cox's head, but the super soldier ducked under the blow with preternatural reflexes. In one fluid motion, Cox drove his fist into the alien's midsection with enough force to crack its armored exoskeleton. Around him, his team was wreaking havoc on the Raymond forces. Private Zhang, her body enhanced with cutting-edge nanotechnology, darted between alien soldiers, her vibroblades slicing through their armor like paper. Corporal Reeves provided covering fire with his experimental plasma rifle, each shot finding its mark with uncanny accuracy. The Remans, accustomed to easy victories against regular human forces, found themselves outmatched and confused. Their formation broke, and they began to fall back under the relentless assault of the super soldiers. As Cox dispatched another Raymond warrior, he noticed a shift in the alien tactics. A new unit had arrived, led by a Riemann whose ornate armor marked him as a high-ranking officer. This was Sub-Commander Krall, though Cox didn't know his name. What he did know was that this alien was different. There was a calculating intelligence in its four eyes as it assessed the battlefield. Krall barked orders in the guttural Riemann language, and his troops immediately began to regroup. The sub-commander activated a device on his wrist, likely calling for reinforcements. Cox knew they needed to press their advantage before the Riemanns could regroup. "Push forward," he ordered his team. "We need to secure this position." The super soldiers redoubled their efforts, their enhanced bodies allowing them to fight with an intensity that would have exhausted normal humans in minutes. They drove the Riemanns back, step by step, until they reached the human defensive position. As the last Riemann soldier fell, Cox turned to the wide-eyed human defenders. "We're here to help," he said, his voice firm and reassuring. "What's the situation?" A bloodied sergeant stepped forward, awe evident in his voice. You're the rumored super soldiers? We thought you were just propaganda." Cox nodded. "We're real, and we're here to turn this fight around. What can you tell me about Riemann positions in the area?" The sergeant quickly briefed Cox on what they knew, including the location of a nearby Riemann command post coordinating local troop movements. As Cox processed this information, formulating a plan of attack, a deafening roar filled the air. All eyes turned skyward as a massive Reman dropship descended from the warship above. Its bay doors opened, disgorging a new wave of alien troops, and, more alarmingly, several enormous combat mechs. These mechanical monstrosities stood 3 stories tall, their arm-mounted energy weapons already charging with an ominous hum. Cox knew they had to act fast. He turned to his team, his mind racing through potential strategies. "We need to split up," he announced. "Half of you stay here to escort civilians to safety and hold this defensive line. The rest, you're with me. We're going to take out that Riemann command post." As his team acknowledged the orders, Cox's enhanced hearing picked up the thunderous footsteps of the approaching mechs. He knew the battle ahead would push even their augmented abilities to the limit, but failure was not an option. With a nod to his team, Cox led the way into the rubble-strewn streets of New York, ready to take the fight directly to the heart of the Riemann Command. As Cox led his team deeper into the heart of New York City, the devastation wrought by the Riemann invasion became increasingly apparent. Collapsed buildings and smoldering craters dotted the landscape, a stark reminder of the aliens' destructive power. The super soldiers moved with purpose, their enhanced senses on high alert for any sign of enemy activity. As they approached the Riemann command post, Cox held up a fist, signaling his team to halt. His augmented vision zoomed in on the structure ahead, revealing a formidable array of defenses. Energy shields shimmered around the perimeter, while automated turrets emerged from concealed positions in nearby buildings. "This isn't going to be a walk in the park," Cox muttered, his mind already racing through potential strategies. He turned to his team, their faces a mix of determination and anticipation. "Frontal assault is out of the question. We need a new approach." After a moment of consideration, Cox laid out his plan. "We're splitting into 3 teams. Lieutenant Chen, you'll lead the diversion. Draw their attention, make them think we're launching a full-scale attack. Captain Rodriguez, your team will infiltrate and take out their power systems. My group will breach the main entrance once the shields are down. As the teams prepared to move out, Cox activated his tactical visor, uploading the plan to each soldier's neural interface. Sync watches, we move on my mark. Lieutenant Sarah Chen nodded, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the coming battle. Ready to raise some hell, sir. Captain Marcus Rodriguez checked his stealth gear one last time. We'll get it done, Cox. Those aliens won't know what hit them. With a final nod to his team, Cox gave the signal. The super soldiers moved out, each group heading towards their designated positions with inhuman speed and precision. Chen's diversion team struck first, their experimental weapons lighting up the night sky as they engaged the Riemann forces head-on. The aliens, caught off guard by the ferocity of the attack, scrambled to respond. Nearby human resistance fighters, inspired by the super soldiers' bravery, joined the fray, adding to the chaos. As the battle raged, Rodriguez's infiltration team slipped past the distracted Reman patrols. Their advanced stealth technology rendered them nearly invisible as they approached the power generator, supplying the command post defenses. Charges set, Rodriguez whispered into his comm. Ready to blow on your command, Cox. Inside the command post, Sub-Commander Vex received urgent reports of the human attack. His mandibles clicked in agitation as he barked orders to his subordinates. Crush these insects. Show them the futility of their resistance. Just then, a new player entered the scene. Colonel Zar Keth, a Reman officer known for his brutal efficiency, arrived to take command of the local forces. His four eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation, quickly realizing the human strategy. They seek to divide our attention, Zar Keth growled. Reinforce the power generator immediately. But his order came too late. Cox, watching the battle unfold through his tactical display, saw his opportunity. Now, Rodriguez! The charges detonated with a thunderous roar, temporarily disabling the energy shields and plunging the command post into darkness. Cox's assault team sprang into action, their enhanced strength allowing them to tear through the weakened defenses without effort. As they breached the main entrance, Cox's team found themselves face-to-face with elite Riemann guards. The close-quarters combat was intense, with both sides utilizing their advanced abilities and weaponry to lethal effect. Cox himself pushed deeper into the facility, his enhanced senses guiding him towards the command center. He burst through a set of doors to find Sub-Commander Vex waiting for him, alien weapon primed and ready. You dare to challenge the might of the Riemann Empire? Vex snarled, firing a barrage of energy bolts at Cox. The super soldier dodged with preternatural speed, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. What followed was a brutal hand-to-hand fight, with Cox's augmented strength and reflexes pitted against Vex's alien physiology and combat experience. Outside, the tide of battle began to turn. Colonel Zar Keth, recognizing the threat posed by the super soldiers, deployed his trump card. Experimental Riemann battlesuits designed to counter the humans' enhanced abilities. Lieutenant Chen found her diversion teams suddenly on the defensive as these new enemies entered the fray. Cox, we've got a problem out here, she reported, her voice strained as she ducked under a swipe from a battle-suited Riemann. They've brought in some heavy hitters. Rodriguez's infiltration team, having completed their primary objective, moved to support Chen's embattled unit. The streets of New York transformed into a high-tech war zone as super soldiers clashed with battle-suited Riemanns, energy weapons, and enhanced fists flying in a deadly dance. Back inside the command post, Cox finally gained the upper hand against Sub-Commander Vex. With a well-placed strike, he sent the alien commander crashing into a bank of computers. Wasting no time, Cox accessed the Riemann tactical network, his eyes widening as he discovered crucial information about the invasion force's structure and weaknesses. Team, I've got something, Cox broadcasted. I've found the location of Commander Wren's Central Command in Central Park. This could be the key to turning the tide. But before Cox could fully process the intelligence, a new threat emerged. The massive Riemann warship above New York began to reposition, its main weapon powering up with an ominous hum. Sir, we've got a problem. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. That warship is targeting our position. We need to move now. Cox found himself faced with an impossible decision: stay and gather more intel, potentially losing his teams in the process, or withdraw with the information they'd already acquired. The fate of the mission, and possibly the entire human resistance, hung in the balance. As Cox weighed his options, Colonel Zarketh's forces outside began to overwhelm the human positions. The super soldiers, formidable as they were, found themselves being pushed back by the sheer number of battle-suited Remans. "Cox, we can't hold them much longer." Chen's voice was urgent, the sound of intense combat in the background. "What are your orders?" The air thrummed with energy as the Raymond warship's weapon reached full power, ready to obliterate the entire sector. Cox knew their time had run out. With a final glance at the wealth of information scrolling across the alien computer screens, he made his decision. "All units, fall back," Cox ordered, already sprinting towards the exit. "We've got what we came for. Rendezvous at Extraction Point Alpha. Move!" As the super soldiers began their desperate escape attempt, Colonel Zarketh watched from a nearby rooftop, his alien features twisting into a sinister grin. The trap was set, ready to spring closed on the fleeing humans. Above, the Raymond warship loomed like a bird of prey, its weapon primed to reduce the battlefield to ashes. Cox and his team raced against time, carrying with them intelligence that could change the course of the war. But with Zarketh's forces closing in and the warship preparing to fire, their escape was far from certain. The streets of New York, already a war-torn battlefield, were about to become the stage for a desperate bid for survival. Survival. With the command post compromised and the Riemann warship powering up its main weapon, Cox knew they had mere moments to act. "Abort data extraction! We're leaving now!" Cox shouted, his enhanced vocal cords carrying the order to every member of his team. He snatched a portable data drive from the alien computer, hoping it contained enough critical information to justify their mission. The super soldiers moved with practiced precision, forming a tight defensive formation as they burst out of the command post. The streets of New York had become a hellscape of burning wreckage and alien technology. Cox's enhanced vision picked out multiple threats: the advancing battle-suited Riemanns, the looming warship above, and the scattered pockets of alien resistance throughout the urban battlefield. "Chen, Rodriguez, converge on my position," Cox ordered through their secured comm channel. "We're initiating a full extraction. Alpha Point is our target." As if in response to Cox's declaration, the air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. The Riemann warship's main weapon glowed with an otherworldly light, casting an eerie purple hue over the ruined cityscape. "Move!" Cox roared, and his team exploded into action. They sprinted through the debris-strewn streets, their augmented muscles and reinforced bones, allowing them to navigate the treacherous terrain with inhuman speed and agility. Energy blasts from Raymond weapons sizzled past them, leaving scorch marks on crumbling buildings. Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "Cox, we're pinned down by heavy fire 2 blocks east of your position. These new Raymond battlesuits are giving us hell." "Hold your ground, Chen," Cox replied, his mind racing through tactical options. "We're coming to you." As they rounded a corner, Cox's team came face to face with a nightmarish sight. A massive 6-legged war machine, a dread crusher, lumbered into view, its multiple energy cannons tracking their movement. "Scatter!" Cox yelled, diving behind an overturned vehicle as the dread crusher opened fire. The street erupted in a maelstrom of energy blasts and flying debris. Cox's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of Rodriguez's team approaching from the west. "Rodriguez, we need an opening," Cox said into his comm. "That dread crusher is blocking our path to Chen's position." "Copy that," Rodriguez replied. "I think I see a weak point in its armor. If we can get close." Cox nodded to himself. "All right, here's the play. My team will provide covering fire. You get in close and plant some charges on that weak spot." As Cox relayed the plan, a new threat emerged. Colonel Zarketh, clad in an imposing command battlesuit, landed with earth-shaking force at the far end of the street. His 4 eyes fixed on Cox, mandibles clicking in anticipation. "The vaunted human super soldier," Zarketh's voice boomed through external speakers. "Your resistance ends here." Cox gritted his teeth, knowing they were rapidly running out of time. The warship above continued to charge its main weapon, the very air crackling with impending destruction. "Rodriguez, move on that dread crusher. Rest of you, with me!" Cox shouted, bursting from cover. What followed was a symphony of violence. Cox's team unleashed a barrage of weapons fire, forcing the dread crusher's operators to divert their attention. Rodriguez and his infiltrators used the chaos to scale nearby buildings, leaping onto the war machine's back with practiced ease. Meanwhile, Cox found himself locked in single combat with Colonel Zarketh. The Raymond commander's battlesuit amplified his already formidable strength, making each blow a potential death sentence. Cox's augmented reflexes allowed him to dodge and weave, looking for an opening in the aliens' defenses. Their duel took them across rooftops and through the skeletal remains of once towering skyscrapers. Cox's training and adaptability began to show, allowing him to anticipate Zarketh's moves and counter effectively. Just as Cox managed to land a crushing blow to Zarketh's suit, temporarily staggering the alien commander, a massive explosion rocked the battlefield. Rodriguez had successfully detonated his charges, and the Dread Crusher collapsed in a heap of twisted metal and alien technology. "Path clear," Rodriguez reported. "Chen, you've got an opening." Chen's team didn't need to be told twice. They burst from their cover, laying down suppressing fire as they made their way towards Cox's position. The human resistance fighters, inspired by the super soldier's actions, redoubled their efforts against the Riemann ground forces. Cox used the momentary distraction to gain the upper hand against Zarketh. With a series of lightning-fast strikes, he managed to breach the colonel's battlesuit, sending the alien commander reeling backward. "Fall back!" Zarketh bellowed to his troops, his voice filled with rage and disbelief. As the Raymond forces began to retreat and regroup, Cox's comm crackled to life with an urgent message from General Steele at the Pentagon. "Cox, do you read? We're sending in a stealth dropship for immediate evac. ETA 5 minutes. You need to hold your position." Cox looked up at the Riemann warship, its weapon now pulsing with barely held back energy. 5 minutes might as well be an eternity. "Understood, General," Cox replied, his voice steady despite the dire situation. "We'll be here." He turned to his assembled team, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and persistence. The extracted data felt heavy in Cox's possession, a physical reminder of everything at stake. "Listen up," Cox called out. "Evac is 5 minutes out. We hold this position no matter what. The fate of humanity depends on the intel we've gathered today." As if on cue, the distant whine of Riemann dropships filled the air. Colonel Zarketh's reinforcements were incoming, determined to prevent the super soldier's escape. Cox and his team took up defensive positions around the designated extraction point, weapons at the ready. The air crackled with tension and energy from the looming Riemann warship. As the first wave of enemy forces came into view, Cox steadied his breath, knowing the next 5 minutes would determine the course of the war, and perhaps the very future of the human race. The first Riemann dropships screamed overhead, their engines drowning out the chaos below. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the ground, followed by a low hum that seemed to vibrate through Cox's bones. A translucent dome of energy materialized around them, its iridescent surface stretching across a 10-block radius. "What the hell?" Rodriguez exclaimed, his weapon raised uselessly against the barrier. Cox's enhanced vision picked up the telltale signs of alien technology. "It's a Riemann energy field," he growled. "Zarketh's backup plan." The team's comms crackled to life with General Steele's urgent voice. "Cox, our sensors are picking up a massive energy surge. That barrier is trapping you inside." Cox's mind raced, assessing their options. The warship above continued its ominous charge-up sequence, time slipping away with each passing second. "Listen up," Cox addressed his team, his voice cutting through the tension. "We need to find the source of this barrier and shut it down. Chen, take your group and scout the perimeter. Look for any weak points or connections to our power grid." Chen nodded sharply, signaling her team to move out. "Rodriguez," Cox continued, "you're on recon. Search nearby buildings for alien tech. That generator has to be close." "On it, sir," Rodriguez replied, already moving with his squad. Cox turned to the remaining soldiers. "The rest of you are with me. We're heading to the center of this dome. That's likely where the energy concentration is highest." As they pushed through the debris-strewn streets, Cox's enhanced senses picked up a new threat. A group of Raymond's soldiers approached, but something was off about their movement. "Contact front," Cox warned, raising his weapon. The aliens emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an unnatural purple light. As they advanced, Cox felt a strange pressure building in his head. "Psionic troopers!" one of his soldiers shouted, his voice strained. "They're trying to get in our heads." Cox's mental training kicked in, allowing him to resist the alien influence. He watched as some of the human resistance fighters nearby clutched their heads in confusion, their movements becoming erratic. "Focus!" Cox barked at his team. "Remember your training. Don't let them in." The super soldiers engaged the psionic troopers in close-quarters combat. Their augmented strength and reflexes gave them an edge, but the aliens' mind-bending abilities made the fight unpredictable and chaotic. Cox ducked under a Raymond's energy blade, countering with a devastating uppercut that sent the alien flying. He spun, narrowly avoiding a psionic blast that left a smoking crater in the concrete behind him. As they fought, Chen's voice came through the comm. "Cox, we've found something. There's a weak point in the barrier where it's interfacing with a power substation. We're working on disrupting it, but..." Her transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by the sound of heavy weapons fire. "Chen! Chen!" Cox called out, but received only static in response. Before he could process this new development, Rodriguez's team reported in. "Sir, we've located the main generator. It's in the basement of that half-collapsed skyscraper 2 blocks north. We're moving to..." Rodriguez's voice was suddenly drowned out by a high-pitched whine. "Drones! They've got combat drones!" Cox gritted his teeth, the situation spiraling further out of control. He glanced up at the Raymond warship, its weapon now pulsing with barely held-back energy. They were running out of time. "All teams, converge on Rodriguez's position," Cox ordered. "We need to take out that generator." As his squad fought their way through the streets, Cox's comm crackled once more. This time, it was General Steele. "Cox, we're sending you a package. Experimental EMP weapon, codename Blackout. It should disable the barrier, but be warned. It could affect your team's enhanced systems as well." Cox weighed the risks. The EMP could leave them vulnerable, but without it, they'd be vaporized when the warship fired. "Understood, General. We'll make it work." As they approached the skyscraper, Cox saw Chen's team engaged in a fierce firefight with Raymond battlesuits. Leading the alien force was Colonel Zarketh himself, his imposing figure unmistakable even from a distance. Rodriguez's team was pinned down at the building's entrance, fighting off waves of combat drones that swarmed through the air like angry metallic insects. Cox made a split-second decision. "Teams, new orders. Focus on the generator. I'll deal with Zarketh." He charged towards the Raymond colonel, dodging energy blasts and leaping over debris. Zarketh saw him coming, mandibles clicking in anticipation of their rematch. "Back for more, human?" the alien commander taunted, his battlesuit powering up with a menacing hum. Cox didn't waste breath on a reply. He launched himself at Zarketh, their enhanced bodies colliding with bone-jarring force. The two leaders became a blur of motion, trading blows that would have pulverized an ordinary human or Remen. As Cox fought, he caught glimpses of the battle raging around him. His super soldiers were pushing through the Raymond defenses, inching closer to the generator with each passing second. The air was thick with energy blasts, the scream of drones, and the thunderous impacts of battlesuit weaponry. Suddenly, General Steele's voice cut through the chaos. "Cox, the warship's about to fire. You have less than 5 minutes." Cox redoubled his efforts against Zarketh, knowing that everything hinged on disabling that generator. As they grappled atop a pile of rubble, Cox saw a flash of movement. Chen's team had created a temporary weakness in the energy barrier. "Sir!" Chen's voice came through, strained but triumphant. "We've got a way out, but it won't last long." Cox knew what he had to do. With a surge of strength, he broke free from Zarketh's grip and activated his comm. "All teams, this is Cox. New plan." As he outlined his strategy, Cox kept one eye on Zarketh and the other on the pulsing weapon of the Remen warship above. The next few minutes would determine not just their fate, but potentially the outcome of the entire war. The final confrontation was at hand, and Cox steeled himself for what promised to be the fight of his life. In that fraction of a second, Cox made his decision. His hand flew to his suit's control panel, activating the experimental overdrive mode. A surge of energy coursed through his body, every nerve ending firing at once as his already enhanced abilities pushed far beyond their normal limits. "All teams, converge on the exit point," Cox barked into his comm. "I'll handle Zarketh and meet you there." Before Zarketh could react, Cox was upon him. The Raymond Colonel's eyes widened in shock as Cox moved with impossible speed, his fist connecting with the alien's battlesuit with a resounding crack. Zarketh stumbled backward, his mandibles clicking in confusion and alarm. Cox pressed his advantage, launching into a flurry of strikes that left Zarketh reeling. Each blow sent shockwaves through the air, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The Raymond's advanced armor began to buckle under the relentless assault, sparks flying as Cox's augmented strength overwhelmed its defenses. "Rodriguez, status on the generator," Cox called out, ducking under a wild swing from Zarketh. "Charges set, sir." Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm. "Ready to blow on your command." Cox nodded, focusing back on the fight. Zarketh had recovered somewhat, his battlesuit's systems struggling to compensate for the damage. The alien commander lashed out with an energy blade, the air sizzling as it narrowly missed Cox's head. "You cannot hope to prevail, human," Zarketh snarled, his voice distorted by his suit's damaged speakers. "Our victory is inevitable." Cox didn't waste breath on a reply. Instead, he feinted left, then struck with lightning speed at a weak point in Zarketh's armor. His fist punched through the alien alloy, grabbing onto vital components inside. With a grunt of effort, Cox tore the entire section free, leaving Zarketh's right side exposed. The Raymond Colonel stumbled, his suit's systems failing. Cox seized the opportunity, grappling with Zarketh and using his overdrive-enhanced strength to literally tear the alien from his damaged battlesuit. Zarketh thrashed in Cox's grip, but without his armor, he was no match for the super soldier's augmented power. "Chen, what's your status?" Cox asked, securing the struggling Zarketh. "We've created a weak point in the barrier, sir," Chen reported. "It's fluctuating, but it should hold for a few more minutes." Cox nodded, glancing up at the Raymond warship. Its main weapon pulsed ominously, energy building to critical levels. "Rodriguez, detonate now! Everyone, move to the extraction point!" As Rodriguez's team triggered the explosives, Cox hefted the captured Zarketh over his shoulder and sprinted towards the designated exit. The ground shook violently as the generator exploded, the energy dome above them beginning to flicker and destabilize. Cox's team converged on the weakened section of the barrier, their enhanced bodies allowing them to push through the fluctuating energy field. Arcs of residual energy crackled around them, singeing their armor but failing to penetrate their augmented defenses. Just as the last super soldier cleared the barrier, the Raymond warship unleashed its devastating attack. The energy dome collapsed inward, containing the bulk of the blast. A massive shockwave rippled outward, toppling weakened structures and sending debris flying in all directions. Cox and his team pushed through the chaos, making their way to the extraction point where the stealth dropship waited. As they boarded, Cox caught a glimpse of the smoldering crater that now occupied the center of New York City. "Everyone accounted for?" Cox asked, securing the unconscious Zarketh in a holding cell. "All present and correct, sir," Rodriguez reported, his voice betraying his exhaustion. As the dropship lifted off, its cloaking systems engaging, Cox felt the adrenaline begin to ebb. The strain of the overdrive mode hit him like a freight train, every muscle in his body screaming in protest. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus on their next moves. "General Steele, this is Cox," he said into his comm. "Mission accomplished. We've acquired the intel and captured Colonel Zarketh, requesting immediate debrief upon arrival." As the dropship sped towards their secure facility, Cox looked at his team. They were battered, exhausted, but alive. They had proven that humanity could stand against the Riemann threat, but he knew this was just the beginning. Unbeknownst to Cox and his team, their success had not gone unnoticed. Deep within Central Park, now transformed into a fortified Riemann stronghold, Commander Wren observed the aftermath of the battle. His compound eyes narrowed as he processed the implications of this human victory. "Prepare our defenses," Wren ordered his subordinates. "These human super soldiers are more formidable than anticipated. We must adapt our strategy immediately." As the cloaked dropship disappeared into the night sky, both sides prepared for the next phase of the war. The super soldiers had struck a significant blow against the Riemann invaders, but the alien force was far from defeated. The battle for Earth was about to enter a new, more intense phase, with the fate of both species hanging in the balance. Balance. As the stealth dropship streaked through the night sky, Cox felt the weight of their recent victory mingled with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The aircraft descended rapidly, entering a hidden hangar nestled within the Appalachian Mountains. As the bay doors sealed shut behind them, Cox and his team disembarked, their boots hitting the polished concrete floor with a series of dull thuds. "Welcome to Fortress Alpha," a stern voice called out. General Marcus Steele strode towards them, his face a mask of controlled urgency. "Excellent work in New York, Cox, but we don't have time to celebrate." Before Cox could respond, medical teams swarmed around them, assessing injuries and helping the wounded. Security personnel moved in, swiftly securing the unconscious form of Colonel Zarketh. "Sir," Cox began, his muscles screaming in protest as the adrenaline wore off. "The intel we retrieved—" "Already being analyzed," Steele cut him off, gesturing for Cox to follow. They moved quickly through the bustling underground facility, passing rows of advanced computers and holographic displays. "Dr. Petrova is leading the effort. She's our top mind on Raymond Tech." They entered a high-security lab where a woman with sharp features and piercing eyes stood before a sprawling holographic display. She turned as they approached, her eyes lighting up with interest. "Ah, the man of the hour," Dr. Petrova said, her accent hinting at Eastern European origins. "Your team's data is proving invaluable, Major Cox. We've already identified the Raymond fleet's primary staging area on the dark side of the moon." Cox nodded, absorbing the information. "What about their defenses? Any weaknesses we can exploit?" Before Petrova could answer, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the room in an ominous glow. "What the hell?" Steele growled, activating a nearby console. Security feeds flickered to life, showing chaos unfolding in the detention area. Colonel Zarketh, now fully conscious, was tearing through guards like they were made of paper. "Impossible," Cox muttered, watching the Raymond officer neutralize his captors with ruthless efficiency. "We stripped him of all tech." "Biological implant," Petrova said, her eyes wide. "We should have anticipated this." Steele's face hardened. "Cox, take your team and contain this situation. Now!" Despite his exhaustion, Cox's enhanced body responded instantly. He sprinted through the facility, gathering his squad as they raced to intercept Zarketh. They found the alien colonel fighting his way towards the communications center, leaving a trail of unconscious humans in his wake. "Zarketh!" Cox shouted, charging forward. "Stand down!" The Riemann officer spun, his alien features twisting into a snarl. He lunged at Cox, moving with unnatural speed. The two collided in a blur of motion, trading blows that would have shattered ordinary bones. The narrow corridors of Fortress Alpha became a battleground, as Cox and his team engaged Zarketh in close-quarters combat. The alien's desperation made him even more dangerous, his strikes fueled by the knowledge that failure meant certain captivity. They crashed through laboratory equipment, sent sparks flying from damaged consoles, and left dents in reinforced walls. Cox could feel his earlier exhaustion threatening to overwhelm him, but he pushed through, matching Zarketh blow for blow. The chase led them through various sections of the underground complex. In the hydroponics bay, they dodged between rows of plants that provided oxygen and food for the base. In the power generation room, arcs of electricity crackled dangerously close as they grappled near humming generators. "He's heading for the secondary comm array," Chen's voice crackled through Cox's earpiece. Cox redoubled his efforts, pushing his enhanced body to its limits. They burst into the backup communications center, just as Zarketh reached for the controls. Cox launched himself forward, tackling the alien mid-motion. They crashed into the console, fingers scrambling for dominance over the controls. For a heart-stopping moment, Zarketh's clawed hand found purchase. A burst of data streamed out before Cox severed the connection with a well-placed strike. The console sparked and died, plunging the room into relative darkness. In the dim emergency lighting, Cox and Zarketh faced each other, both panting heavily. The Raymond Colonel's eyes gleamed with a mix of fury and grudging respect. "It seems we are evenly matched, human," Zarketh growled. Cox didn't waste breath on a reply. He feinted left, then struck with lightning speed at a weak point in Zarketh's defense. The alien stumbled, and Cox pressed his advantage. In a flurry of strikes honed by years of training and enhanced by cutting-edge technology, Cox finally overcame his formidable opponent. Zarketh collapsed, unconscious once more. Cox stood over him, his chest heaving as he fought to catch his breath. "Target contained," he reported through his comm, requesting enhanced security protocols for prisoner transport. As a team of heavily armed guards arrived to secure Zarketh, Cox made his way back to the command center. The adrenaline was fading fast, leaving him feeling every impact, every strain from the intense combat. He found General Steele and Dr. Petrova huddled around a display, their faces grim. "Report, Major," Steele barked as Cox approached. "Zarketh is back in custody, sir," Cox said, but he managed to send a short transmission before we stopped him. Steele's eyes sharp. "That's not our only problem. Doctor, tell him what you've found." Petrova stepped forward, her eyes alight with a mixture of excitement and worry. "Major, we've discovered a potential weakness in the Raman energy shielding systems. If we can exploit it, we might be able to disable their warships." Cox felt a glimmer of hope. "That's good news, isn't it?" "It would be," Steele interjected, "if we had the means to develop a countermeasure. Dr. Petrova needs direct access to a functioning piece of Raman's shield technology." The implications hit Cox like a physical blow. "The only place we'd find that is the Raman lunar base," Petrova finished for him. Before Cox could process this, an analyst called out from a nearby station. "Sir, long-range sensors are picking up increased activity in the Raman fleet. They're mobilizing, changing course. They're heading straight for Earth." The command center erupted into a flurry of activity. Steele turned to Cox, his expression grave. "Zarketh's transmission must have tipped them off. They're coming for us, Cox. We're out of time." Cox stared at the holographic display, showing the approaching Raman fleet. The enormity of their situation settled over him like a physical weight. He turned back to Steele, straightening despite his exhaustion. "What are our orders, sir?" Steele's eyes hardened with purpose. "Prepare your team, Major. You're going to the moon." "Moon," Steele said, his voice grave. "We need that shield technology, and we need it now." Cox nodded, his mind already racing through the implications. A mission to the moon was unlike anything they had attempted before. The challenges would be immense, but the stakes were even higher. "How long do we have to prepare, sir?" Cox asked, straightening his posture, despite the bone-deep fatigue. Steele's face hardened. 24 hours, Major. The Raman fleet's movement has forced our hand. We need to act before they can consolidate their forces." Cox inhaled sharply. 24 hours was barely enough time to brief the team, let alone prepare for a mission of this magnitude. But he knew better than to voice his doubts. Instead, he simply nodded. "We'll be ready, sir." As if sensing his thoughts, Dr. Petrova stepped forward. "My team is already modifying your suits for lunar operations," she said, pulling up a holographic display of their armor. "We're incorporating experimental stealth technology to evade Raman detection systems. It's untested in field conditions, but it's our best chance at getting you onto that base undetected." Cox studied the schematics, noting the sleek additions to their already formidable armor. "What about life support? The lunar environment is hostile beyond imagination," a new voice interrupted. Cox turned to see a man he didn't recognize striding into the command center. The newcomer's posture and bearing marked him as military, but there was something else, a confidence that spoke of experience beyond Earth's atmosphere. "Major Jack Harper," the man introduced himself, extending a hand. "Former astronaut, current super soldier. I'll be joining your team for this operation." Cox shook Harper's hand, feeling the enhanced strength that mirrored his own. "Welcome aboard, Major. Your experience will be invaluable." As Harper began briefing them on the specifics of lunar operations, an alarm blared through the command center. A technician called out, "Sir, we're detecting increased activity from the Raman fleet. They're changing formation, accelerating towards Earth." Steele's face hardened. "We're out of time. Cox, get your team to the launch bay. The Shadowhawk is prepped and waiting." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Cox's team, along with Major Harper, boarded the sleek stealth spacecraft codenamed Shadowhawk. As they strapped in, Harper ran them through final checks on their modified EVA suits. "Remember," Harper said, his voice tight with focus, "the low gravity will amplify your enhanced abilities. A small push here could send you flying for kilometers. Control is everything." The Shadowhawk lifted off under cover of darkness, its advanced stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible to both Earth and Riemann sensors. As they broke atmosphere, Cox felt the familiar weightlessness settle in, amplified by the ship's artificial gravity systems. Their journey to lunar orbit was tense, punctuated by a series of complex maneuvers to evade Raman patrols. As they approached the moon, the ship's sensors lit up with alarming data. "Major," the pilot called out, "we're detecting a massive Raman fleet gathering on the far side of the moon. It looks like they're preparing for a major offensive." Cox moved to the cockpit, studying the sensor readouts. The sheer number of Riemann ships sent a chill down his spine. If they failed in their mission, Earth wouldn't stand a chance against this armada. As they neared their insertion point, disaster struck. A Riemann patrol ship on a routine sweep forced the Shadowhawk to take evasive action, pushing them dangerously close to the moon's surface. "Hang on!" Harper shouted, taking control of the ship. His hands flew over the controls, guiding the Shadowhawk through a treacherous field of lunar debris. The ship shuddered and groaned, scraping past jagged moon rocks by mere centimeters. Cox gripped his seat, watching in awe as Harper's expert piloting kept them from both crashing and detection. But the evasive maneuvers had cost them precious time and position. "We're off course," Harper reported grimly. "The patrol ship is still searching the area. If we try to reach our original insertion point, we'll be spotted for sure." Cox made a split-second decision. "We start the spacewalk now. How close can you get us to the base perimeter?" Harper's eyes narrowed as he calculated. "Close enough for your EVA thrusters, but it'll be tight. You'll have to move fast and stay low to avoid detection." "It'll have to do," Cox said, turning to his team. "Suit up. We're going for a walk." As the team donned their specialized EVA suits, Cox felt the weight of the mission pressing down on him. Each suit was a marvel of engineering, equipped with limited thruster capabilities and magnetic boots for traversing the lunar surface. But they were about to put this untested technology to the ultimate test. The ship's sensors suddenly blared a warning. "Riemann shuttlecraft approaching," the pilot announced. 2 minutes until they're in visual range." "Move now," Cox ordered, leading his team to the airlock. As the outer doors opened, revealing the vast lunar landscape, Cox took a deep breath. This was it. No room for error, no second chances. With a nod to his team, Cox stepped into the void, his magnetic boots disengaging from the Shadowhawk's hull. He activated his thrusters, propelling himself towards the lunar surface with controlled bursts. Behind him, his team fanned out in a predetermined formation, using the cratered terrain for cover. As they bounded across the lunar surface, Cox marveled at how their enhanced abilities were amplified in the low gravity. Each jump carried them hundreds of meters, requiring precise control to avoid overshooting their targets, or worse, launching themselves into space. They had covered nearly half the distance to the Remen base when Cox spotted their first major obstacle. A massive energy shield, previously undetected by Earth's long-range scanners, surrounded the entire complex. Its shimmering surface pulsed with an otherworldly glow, presenting an impenetrable barrier between them and their objective. Cox activated his comm, keeping his voice low despite the vacuum of space. "Petrova, are you seeing this?" "Affirmative," came the doctor's tense reply. "The shield's oscillating frequency is interfering with our stealth systems. If you get too close, you'll be exposed." As Petrova worked frantically to analyze the shield, Cox scanned their surroundings. They were dangerously exposed on the open lunar plain, with the Riemann shuttlecraft still searching the area. Time was running out. Suddenly, Movement caught Cox's eye. A lone Raman sentry was patrolling the shield's edge, its alien form unmistakable against the stark lunar landscape. Cox's mind raced, weighing their options. Petrova's untested method of breaching the shield could be fatal if miscalculated, but capturing the sentry and using its access codes to deactivate a section of the shield, it was risky, but it offered a chance. He signaled his team, indicating the sentry with a series of hand gestures. They responded instantly, spreading out to flank the unsuspecting alien. As Cox prepared to give the order to move in, he knew that the next few moments would determine not just the fate of their mission, but possibly the future of humanity itself. With a deep breath, he signaled the attack, launching himself towards the Riemann sentry with all the power his enhanced body and lunar gravity could provide. Muster. The team followed his lead, their enhanced bodies propelling them across the lunar surface with astonishing speed and precision. As they closed in on the unsuspecting Raman sentry, Cox signaled for Lieutenant Chen to take point. Chen, her suit's stealth capabilities engaged, moved with fluid grace across the pockmarked terrain. The low gravity amplified her already impressive agility, allowing her to close the distance to the alien guard in mere seconds. With practiced efficiency, Chen produced a neural disruptor from her utility belt. The device, a compact cylinder of Earth's most advanced technology, pulsed with a soft blue light. As the Riemann turned, Chen struck. The disruptor made contact with the alien's armor, releasing a targeted electromagnetic pulse. The sentry's body went rigid, then collapsed silently to the lunar surface. "Target neutralized," Chen reported, her voice barely above a whisper in their comms. Captain Rodriguez was already in motion, his hands moving with surgical precision over the Raman's armor. He located the biometric scanner, a device that looked more like a growth than a piece of technology. "Petrova, I've got the access device," Rodriguez said, his fingers probing the alien tech. "Talk me through this." Dr. Petrova's voice crackled through their comms, tense but focused. "The biometric lock is tied to the Raman's unique physiology. You'll need to trick it into thinking it's still attached to the host." Rodriguez worked quickly, following Petrova's instructions. He manipulated the device's neural interface, bypassing security protocols that would have stymied even the most advanced Earth computers. After several tense moments, the device emitted a low hum. "I think we're in," Rodriguez announced. Cox watched as a small section of the shimmering energy shield before them flickered and disappeared, leaving a gap just large enough for them to pass through. "Move!" he ordered, and the team sprang into action. They crossed the threshold, the faint tingle of the deactivated shield washing over them as they passed. Once inside, Cox directed his team to conceal the unconscious Riemann sentry behind a rocky outcropping. "Remember your training," Cox said, his voice low and steady. "We move like them. We act like them. Any slip could blow our cover." The team fell into formation, mimicking the stiff, almost mechanical movements of Riemann patrols. They made their way toward the main complex, each step measured and precise. As they approached the base proper, Cox felt a growing sense of unease. The layout before them bore little resemblance to the intelligence they'd gleaned from Zarketh. Where their intel had indicated a straightforward approach to the central facilities, they now faced a labyrinth of interconnected structures. "This isn't right," Harper muttered, his experienced eyes scanning the complex. "They've completely reconfigured the base." Cox's mind raced, considering their options. The mission parameters had just become significantly more complicated. "Harper, what's your right on this?" The former astronaut studied the layout, his augmented vision picking up details invisible to standard human perception. "There's a pattern here," he said after a moment. "See how the structures radiate outward? I'd bet my last breath of oxygen that the shield generator is in that central building." Cox nodded, trusting Harper's assessment. "That's our target then. We move in pairs, maintain Riemann patrol patterns. Chen, Rodriguez, take point. Harper, you're with me." The team began their approach, weaving through the alien structures with calculated precision. They passed several Riemann patrols, each encounter a test of their disguise and nerve. Cox felt sweat beading on his brow despite his suit's climate control. They had almost reached the central structure when alarms suddenly blared across the base. Harsh, guttural sounds echoed through the thin lunar atmosphere, picked up by their suit's external sensors. "We've been made," Cox growled, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. The base erupted into activity. Raymond troops poured out of nearby buildings, their alien forms moving with unsettling speed and coordination. Within moments, Cox and his team found themselves surrounded, their carefully maintained cover blown. "New plan," Cox announced, his voice tight with tension. "Chen, Rodriguez, create a diversion. Draw as many of them away as you can. Harper, you're with me. We're going for the shield generator." As Chen and Rodriguez engaged the Raymond forces in a fierce firefight, Cox and Harper made a break for the central structure. They used their enhanced strength to leap impossible distances, bounding over Raymond troops and dodging energy blasts that left scorch marks on the lunar surface. They reached the central building just as massive security doors began to slide shut. Cox and Harper pushed their augmented bodies to the limit, diving and rolling through narrowing gaps. The final door slammed closed behind them with a resounding thud, cutting off the sounds of battle outside. Inside, they faced a new threat. A group of Raymond soldiers stood before them, but these were unlike any they had encountered before. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, their eyes glowing with an eerie shared intelligence. "Quantum-linked soldiers," Harper breathed, recognizing the threat from their intelligence briefings. "They operate as a single unit." Cox didn't have time to respond. The quantum-linked soldiers attacked as one, their coordinated assault pushing the two super soldiers to their absolute limits. The low gravity turned the battle into a three-dimensional chess match, with combatants leaping, spinning, and colliding in midair. As Cox grappled with one of the aliens, narrowly avoiding a strike that would have crushed his helmet, he noticed something. There was a pattern to their movements, a split-second delay between one soldier's action and the other's reactions. "Harper!" Cox called out, ducking under a Raymond swing and using his attacker's momentum to throw him into another. "Their link is their weakness. If we can disrupt it, we might be able to take them all out at once." Harper nodded, understanding immediately. They began to adjust their suit's systems, preparing to emit an electromagnetic pulse calibrated to scramble the aliens' shared neural network. Just as they were about to activate the pulse, Harper's suit picked up a massive energy spike deeper within the facility. "Cox!" he shouted. "They're powering something up. Could be a self-destruct sequence." Cox's mind raced. The electromagnetic pulse could disable the quantum-linked soldiers, clearing their path to the shield generator. But if the Raymonds were preparing to destroy the very technology they had come to steal, every second counted. He had to make a choice, and he had to make it now. The fate of the mission, and possibly the entire war, hung in the balance. Cox took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. Next. In that split second, Cox made his choice. "Harper, we're going for the tech," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Activate emergency overdrive." Harper nodded, his fingers flying over his suit's controls. Cox did the same, feeling a surge of power as his already enhanced abilities kicked into overdrive. His muscles tensed, coiled like springs, and then he launched himself forward. The two super soldiers sailed over the heads of the quantum-linked soldiers, their enhanced strength combined with the low lunar gravity propelling them in graceful arcs. The Raymonds, caught off guard by the unexpected maneuver, took precious seconds to reorient themselves. Cox and Harper hit the ground running, their magnetic boots engaging just long enough to provide traction before disengaging for their next bound. They raced deeper into the facility, alarms blaring around them with increasing intensity. As they rounded a corner, they encountered their first major obstacle, a shimmering laser grid that crisscrossed the corridor. Cox's enhanced vision picked up the deadly energy beams, each one capable of slicing through their suits like butter. "I've got this," Harper said, pulling a small device from his belt. He tossed it into the grid, where it emitted a brief pulse. The lasers flickered and died. They pressed on, only to be met by a sudden shift in gravity. Cox felt his body lighten even further, then abruptly increase in weight. The fluctuations came in rapid succession, threatening to throw them off balance. "Compensating," Cox grunted, adjusting his suit's internal gyroscopes. Harper followed suit, and they pushed through the disorienting field. A massive bio-lock door loomed before them, its surface covered in pulsating alien circuitry. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. Use the access codes we got from the Sentry. Should work on any standard Riemann tech. Cox quickly input the code, his fingers dancing over the alien interface. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a hiss of escaping air, the door slid open. They burst through, only to find themselves face-to-face with a Riemann, unlike any they'd seen before. Its eyes glowed with an eerie intelligence, and its movements spoke of calculation rather than aggression. Dr. Zax, Harper breathed, recognizing the lead Riemann scientist from their mission briefings. Zax's alien features contorted in what might have been a sneer. "Humans!" it hissed, its voice a grating sound that set Cox's teeth on edge. "You are too late." The Riemann scientist's hand slammed down on a nearby console. Instantly, a new set of alarms began to wail. "Self-destruct sequence initiated," an emotionless voice announced in the Riemann language, which Cox's translator rendered into English. "Time to detonation, 5 minutes." Cox didn't hesitate. He launched himself at Zax, his enhanced muscles propelling him across the room in a heartbeat. The Riemann scientist met his charge with surprising strength, its limbs moving in alien patterns that defied Cox's combat training. As they grappled, Cox shouted to Harper, "Disable that self-destruct. I'll keep him busy." Harper nodded, racing to the main console. His fingers flew over the alien controls, his enhanced mind processing the unfamiliar technology at lightning speed. Cox found himself fully engaged in the fight of his life. Zax's movements were unlike anything he'd encountered, a fluid style that seemed to anticipate his every move. A strike that should have connected glanced off harmlessly. A grapple that should have pinned the Riemanns slipped away like smoke. "Cox!" Harper's voice cut through his concentration. "I've stopped the self-destruct, but it triggered some kind of failsafe, the shield generators overloading." As if to punctuate Harper's words, the room began to vibrate. Arcs of energy crackled across the walls, growing in intensity with each passing second. Cox redoubled his efforts, pushing his enhanced body to its absolute limits. He feinted left, then dropped low, sweeping Zax's legs out from under him. The Riemann scientist crashed to the ground, and Cox followed up with a decisive strike to a cluster of nerve endings they'd identified in Riemann physiology. Zax went limp, unconscious. "What's our status?" Cox demanded, rushing to Harper's side. "Bad," Harper replied grimly. "We've got minutes before this place vaporizes. We can't take the whole generator, but I can extract its core components." "Do it," Cox ordered. He opened a channel to the rest of the team. "Chen, Rodriguez, report." "We're holding them off," Chen's voice came back, punctuated by the sound of weapons fire. "But Cox, we're picking up massive energy signatures in orbit. The Riemann fleet is mobilizing. They're about to launch a full-scale attack on Earth." Cox's mind raced, processing the new information. They had the tech they came for, but now faced an even greater threat. He made another split-second decision. "Harper, how quickly can you rig that overloading generator to emit an EM pulse?" Harper's eyes widened as he grasped Cox's plan. "Fast, but sir, it'll fry our suits too." "No choice. Do it." As Harper worked, Cox outlined his plan to the team. "We're going to knock out all Riemann tech in the base. Rendezvous at the extraction point. Be ready to move the second that pulse hits." "Cox," Harper said, his voice tight. "It's ready." Cox took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1, now!" Harper activated the pulse. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, with a thunderous roar, a wave of electromagnetic energy exploded outward. Every light in the facility went dark. The constant hum of alien technology fell silent. In the sudden deafening quiet, Cox's voice rang out. "Move! Move out!" Cox commanded, his voice cutting through the eerie silence that followed the electromagnetic pulse. The team sprinted through the darkened Riemann facility, their enhanced vision allowing them to navigate the maze of corridors with ease. As they reached the extraction point, the familiar silhouette of the Shadowhawk materialized against the star-studded lunar sky. "Everyone aboard now!" Cox ordered as the ship's ramp descended. The moment the last team member was inside, The Shadowhawk's engines roared to life, propelling them away from the lunar surface. Cox strapped himself into the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls. "Sir," Chen's voice crackled over the intercom, "we're picking up multiple Raymond signatures in pursuit. Looks like their ships weren't affected by the pulse." Cox gritted his teeth. "Understood. Harper, status on the shield tech?" "Secured, but it took a beating during our escape," Harper replied from the cargo hold. "We need to get it to Dr. Petrova as soon as possible." As the Shadowhawk approached Earth's orbit, the pursuing Raymond scout ships closed in rapidly. The ship's sensors blared warnings of incoming weapons fire. "Direct confrontation is not an option," Cox muttered, his mind racing. Suddenly, an idea struck him. "Harper, plot a course that will use Earth's gravity for a slingshot maneuver. We're going to shake these bastards off our tail." Harper's fingers danced across the navigation console, plotting the daring trajectory. "Course plotted, sir, but I must warn you, the G-forces will be intense. No choice, everyone brace for extreme acceleration." Cox engaged the engines to full power, feeling the Shadowhawk lurch as it plunged towards Earth's atmosphere. The ship shuddered violently as it skimmed the upper layers of the planet's gravitational field, the Raymond pursuers falling behind as they struggled to match the maneuver. For a moment it seemed they had succeeded, then a series of alarms blared throughout the ship. "Cox!" Harper shouted over the din. "The engines are failing. The G-forces were too much." The Shadowhawk bucked and shuddered as system after system went dark. Cox fought with the controls, trying to stabilize their rapidly decaying orbit. "Stealth systems are offline," Rodriguez reported, her voice tight with tension. "Propulsion is at minimal capacity. We're going down." Cox made a split-second decision. "Jettison the outer hull. We need to reduce mass for re-entry." The team worked in perfect synchronization, their augmented reflexes allowing them to execute Cox's orders with lightning speed. As the outer hull of the Shadowhawk peeled away, the heat of re-entry began to build. "Everyone into your suits," Cox commanded. "We're going to have to ride this one out the hard way." The super soldiers engaged their suit systems, the advanced technology their last line of defense against the extreme conditions. As the remnants of the Shadowhawk hurtled towards Earth's surface, Cox and his team used their enhanced strength to manually adjust the craft's trajectory. "Aim for the Mojave," Cox grunted, his muscles straining against the controls. "We need to minimize civilian casualties." The desert landscape rushed up to meet them, a vast expanse of sand and rock. With a deafening crash, the Shadowhawk slammed into the earth, scattering debris across the barren terrain. For a moment, silence reigned. Then one by one, the team emerged from the wreckage, their suits battered but intact. "Status report," Cox called out, scanning the crash site. "Alive, sir," Chen responded, helping Rodriguez to her feet. "But the shield tech took a hit in the landing." Harper was already examining the damaged components. "It's not good, Cox. We need to get this to Dr. Petrova fast, or all of this might have been for nothing." Before Cox could respond, a faint signal caught his attention. He adjusted his suit's communication array, honing in on the transmission. "It's a distress call," he announced. "Coming from a nearby military outpost, they're under heavy Raymond attack." The team exchanged grim looks, understanding the implications. The Raymond invasion of Earth had begun. "That outpost might have the equipment we need to contact Fortress Alpha," Cox said, his mind already formulating a plan. "We move out immediately. The fate of humanity depends on getting this tech to Dr. Petrova." As they prepared to depart, the super soldiers cast one last look at the wreckage of the Shadowhawk. Their mission had taken an unexpected turn, but failure was not an option. With the shield technology secured and their enhanced abilities at the ready, Cox led his team towards the besieged outpost, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in their quest to save Earth from the Raymond threat. Cox led his team towards the besieged outpost, their enhanced senses on high alert for any signs of Raymond activity. As they approached, the sound of intense weapon fire and explosions filled the air, growing louder with each step. Upon reaching the outpost perimeter, they were met with a scene of chaos. Raymond forces had surrounded the facility, their advanced weaponry pounding against the human defenses. Cox quickly assessed the situation, his augmented mind processing the tactical data at lightning speed. "We need to get inside and establish contact with Fortress Alpha," he said, gesturing towards a partially collapsed section of the outer wall. "That's our best point of entry. Move fast and stay low." The team sprinted across the open ground, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge incoming fire with superhuman precision. They vaulted over the crumbling wall and found themselves in the thick of the battle. Inside the outpost, human soldiers fought desperately against the alien invaders. Cox spotted a familiar face among the defenders, Colonel Briggs, the outpost commander. "Colonel," Cox called out as they made their way to his position, "we need access to your long-range communication equipment." Briggs turned, his eyes widening at the sight of the super soldiers. "Who the hell are you people?" "That's classified," Cox replied. "But right now, we're your best chance of holding this position. Can you get us to your comm center?" Before Briggs could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the outpost. The colonel's face paled as he checked a nearby monitor. "They've breached our outer defenses," he reported grimly, "and our long-range comms are down. We're cut off." Cox exchanged a look with his team. Their mission had just become significantly more complicated. Suddenly, Chen's enhanced hearing picked up a new sound cutting through the chaos of battle. "Sir, I'm detecting a quantum entanglement transmission. The Remans are using it to coordinate their assault." As if in response to Chen's words, a new wave of Raman forces surged forward. These units moved with fluid precision, their bodies protected by shimmering energy shields that deflected conventional weapons fire. "Those shields," Harper muttered, his eyes narrowing, "they're using tech similar to what we found on the moon." Cox made a split-second decision. "Change of plans. We need to split up. Chen, Rodriguez, you're with Colonel Briggs. Get him and as many of his people as possible to safety. There's got to be an underground bunker or escape tunnel in a facility like this." Briggs nodded, confirming Cox's assumption. "We have a hardened shelter beneath the command center. But what about you?" "Harper and I will create a diversion," Cox replied. "We'll break through their lines and secure transportation. We need to get this shield tech to Dr. Petrova, or none of this will matter." As Chen and Rodriguez escorted Briggs and a group of soldiers towards the bunker, Cox and Harper prepared for their desperate breakout attempt. They armed themselves with the most powerful weapons they could find in the outpost armory, knowing they'd need every advantage against the enhanced Riemann units. "Ready?" Cox asked, his hand on the door leading to the chaotic battlefield outside. Harper nodded, his face set with drive. "Let's show these aliens what humanity's best can do." They burst out into the fray, immediately drawing the attention of the nearest Riemann units. Cox and Harper moved in perfect sync, their augmented bodies allowing them to perform feats that seemed impossible to the human soldiers around them. As they fought their way through the Riemann lines, a massive shadow fell over the battlefield. Cox looked up to see a colossal, six-legged war machine stomping towards them, its multiple energy weapons charging with an ominous hum. "Harper," Cox said, his voice tight, "I think we found our ride out of here." Harper's eyes widened as he took in the enormous Riemann walker. "You can't be serious." "Deadly," Cox replied. "We take that thing down, we've got our gap in their defenses. You up for some creative problem-solving?" A grin spread across Harper's face, the thrill of the challenge overtaking his initial shock. "Always, sir." They quickly formulated a plan, using hand signals to communicate over the din of battle. As the massive walker, which they dubbed the Hex Titan, lumbered closer, Cox and Harper put their strategy into action. Using debris and wrecked vehicles as cover, they maneuvered around the Hex Titan, staying in its blind spots. Cox used his enhanced strength to hurl pieces of rubble at the walker's legs, drawing its attention while Harper circled behind. When the moment was right, Cox cupped his hands and braced himself. Harper sprinted towards him at full speed, his boot landing in Cox's palms. With a grunt of effort, Cox launched Harper into the air, sending him arcing towards the Hex Titan's upper structure. Harper soared through the air, time seeming to slow as he approached the massive war machine. He twisted his body in mid-flight, avoiding a sweeping energy beam, and latched onto the Hex Titan's hull. His fingers dug into the alien metal as he climbed higher, pulling himself towards the walker's shield generator. Below, Cox continued to harass the Hex Titan, keeping its attention divided. He ducked and weaved between its massive legs, using his enhanced agility to stay just out of reach of its stomping feet and energy weapons. Harper reached the shield generator, his hands moving quickly as he planted a series of explosive charges. He set the timer and pushed off, falling freely through the air. Cox tracked his descent, positioning himself perfectly to catch his teammate. The charges detonated with a thunderous boom, temporarily disabling the Hex Titan's shields. Cox and Harper wasted no time, concentrating their fire on the walker's now vulnerable joints and weapon systems. Under their relentless assault, the massive war machine began to falter. Its movements became erratic, its energy weapons firing wildly. With a final, well-placed shot from Cox, the Hex Titan's central power core overloaded. The colossal walker collapsed, crashing to the ground and creating a gap in the Reman defensive line. "Move!" Cox shouted, and he and Harper sprinted through the opening. They raced towards the outpost's motor pool, hoping to find a vehicle capable of getting them clear of the battle zone. As they approached the motor pool, Cox spotted something that made him pause. Amidst the rows of military vehicles stood a unique machine, an experimental all-terrain vehicle with sleek lines and advanced-looking systems. "Harper, check that out," Cox said, gesturing towards the vehicle. "Think that might be our ticket out of here?" Harper's eyes lit up as he took in the machine. "Looks like some kind of deep recon vehicle. Stealth systems, hybrid engine. This could definitely work." They quickly made their way to the vehicle, which bore the codename Nomad on its side. As they familiarized themselves with its controls, Chen's voice crackled over their comms. "Cox, we've secured the colonel and his team in the bunker. We're heading back to your position now." "Good timing," Cox replied. "We've found our ride. Meet us at the motor pool and be ready to move fast. Things are about to get interesting." "Intense. We've got Reman forces closing in from all sides." Cox nodded grimly, his hands flying over the Nomad's controls. The vehicle roared to life, its advanced systems humming with power. As Chen and Rodriguez piled in, Cox gunned the engine, sending the Nomads surging forward through the chaos of the battlefield. The experimental vehicle lived up to its promise, its hybrid engine propelling them at breakneck speed, while its stealth systems helped them evade Reman patrols. As they sped away from the besieged outpost, Cox's mind raced, formulating their next move. "We need to get this shield tech to Dr. Petrova," he said, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "But we can't risk leading the Remans straight to our remaining strongholds." Harper, monitoring the Nomad's sensors, spoke up. "Sir, I'm picking up increased Reman activity in the city ahead. They've set up a command center in one of the downtown skyscrapers." Cox's eyes narrowed as an idea formed. "That command center, it could be our key to turning the tide. If we can infiltrate it, we might be able to disrupt their entire operation." The team exchanged glances, understanding the risks involved in such a bold move. But they also knew that with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, they couldn't afford to play it safe. As night fell, Cox steered the Nomad towards the outskirts of the city. The once bustling metropolis now stood as a ghostly shadow of its former self, its skyline marred by the scars of alien invasion. In the distance, a repurposed skyscraper loomed, its structure now twisted with Reman technology. "That's our target," Cox said, pointing to the building. "We'll use the Nomad's cloaking tech to get as close as we can. Then we go in on foot." They abandoned the vehicle in a concealed location and made their way towards the old subway tunnels that ran beneath the city. As they descended into the dark, debris-filled passages, the sounds of the surface world faded away, replaced by an eerie silence. Their enhanced senses on high alert, the team moved swiftly through the tunnels. Suddenly, Chen held up a hand, signaling the others to stop. "Movement ahead," he whispered. From the shadows emerged a group of armed individuals, their weapons trained on the super soldiers. At their head stood a grizzled man with piercing eyes and a determined set to his jaw. "That's far enough," the man growled. "Who are you, and what are you doing down here?" Cox stepped forward, his hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "I'm Major Cox. We're on a mission to stop the Reman invasion. And you are?" The man's eyes narrowed, studying Cox intently. "Mike Donovan, former subway engineer. Now I'm just trying to keep my people alive." He gestured to the group behind him, a mix of civilians and a few ex-military personnel. Cox quickly explained their mission, emphasizing the critical nature of their objective. As he spoke, he could see the hostility in Donovan's eyes, gradually being replaced by a glimmer of hope. "A chance to hit back at those alien bastards?" Donovan said, a grim smile spreading across his face. "Count us in. I know these tunnels better than anyone. There's an old maintenance shaft that leads right up into that skyscraper they've taken over." With Donovan's help, Cox formulated a new infiltration plan. They would split into two teams. Cox and Chen would ascend through the maintenance shaft, while Harper and Rodriguez would remain in the tunnels with Donovan's group, providing backup and coordinating intelligence. As Cox and Chen began their ascent, the narrow, vertical passage tested even their enhanced abilities. They moved swiftly and silently, their augmented muscles allowing them to climb with incredible speed and precision. Several times they froze in place as Raymond patrols passed by, their alien voices echoing through the shaft. Cox's heart pounded in his chest, not from exertion, but from the tension of their precarious position. One wrong move, one misplaced sound, and their entire mission could be compromised. Finally, they reached the upper floors of the skyscraper. As they emerged from the shaft, Cox and Chen found themselves in a world transformed. The familiar office spaces had been warped and twisted, integrated with alien technology that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. They moved cautiously through the altered corridors, their enhanced senses alert for any sign of Raymond presence. As they approached the central control room, Cox's comm unit crackled to life. "Major," Harper's voice came through, tight with urgency. "We've tapped into their comms. They're planning a massive assault on our strongholds, including the area around Fortress Alpha." Cox's mind focused. The stakes had just gotten even higher. "Understood. We're approaching the control center now. Stand by." As they neared their objective, Cox and Chen encountered a patrol of Riemann soldiers. The aliens' personal shields flared as the super soldiers engaged, but the humans' augmented strength and speed proved too much for the Riemanns to handle. With the immediate threat neutralized, Cox and Chen burst into the central control room. The sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Holographic displays filled the air, showing the full scale of the Riemann invasion plans. As Cox moved to access the main control systems, a bone-chilling roar filled the room. Turning, he found himself face to face with a towering Raymond figure, its eyes blazing with alien fury. "Zarlath," Chen whispered, recognizing the Raymond commander from intelligence briefings. The alien's personal shield crackled with energy as it advanced, its massive form dwarfing even the enhanced humans. Cox and Chen exchanged a quick glance, both understanding that this battle would push them to their absolute limits. As Zarlath charged, Cox dove to the side, his fingers flying over the nearest control panel. He had to trust Chen to keep the Raymond commander occupied while he input the false data that could turn the tide of the war. The room erupted into chaos as Chen and Zarlath engaged in a titanic struggle, their enhanced strength causing the very floor to shudder beneath them. Cox worked feverishly, sweat beading on his brow as he raced against time to complete their mission. Just as Cox finished inputting the false orders, redirecting a significant portion of the Raymond forces to empty decoy locations, Zarlath broke free from Chen's hold. The alien commander lunged towards Cox, its massive clawed hands swiping through the air. Cox ducked, feeling the rush of air as Zarlath's attack missed him by mere inches. He rolled, coming up in a fighting stance beside Chen. The two super soldiers stood side by side, facing down the enraged Riemann commander. As Zarlath prepared for another assault, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. The false orders had taken effect, throwing the Raymond forces into disarray. Zarlath's eyes widened in realization, then narrowed in fury as it understood what the humans had done. "Time to go," Cox said, reaching for the detonator that would trigger the explosives they had planted earlier. As Zarlath charged once more, Cox hit the switch. The building shuddered as explosions ripped through its structure. In the confusion, Cox and Chen made their escape, racing back towards the maintenance shaft. They descended rapidly, the sounds of chaos and destruction echoing above them. As they reached the bottom, they found Harper, Rodriguez, and Donovan's team waiting, weapons ready. "Move!" Cox shouted, and the group took off through the tunnels, the rumble of the collapsing skyscraper growing louder behind them. They emerged from the underground network at a safe distance, turning to witness the full impact of their actions. The Raymond Command Center, once a symbol of the aliens' dominance, now crumbled into ruins. In the sky above, Raymond's ships moved erratically, responding to conflicting orders and false information. As they caught their breath, Cox's comm unit crackled once more. This time, it was General Steele's voice that came through, tight with urgency, but tinged with hope. Major Cox, your team's actions have created a critical opportunity. Abandon your original plan. Head to these coordinates immediately. A hypersonic transport will be waiting to take you and the shield tech to Fortress Alpha. This is our chance to turn the tide. Don't waste it. Cox looked at his team, seeing the same mix of exhaustion and willpower in their eyes that he felt. They had struck a significant blow against the Riemann invasion, but the war was far from finished. As they bid farewell to Donovan and his group, providing them with scavenged weapons and supplies, Cox knew that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. They made their way back to the hidden Nomad, the experimental vehicle their ticket to the secret airfield where their transport awaited. As Cox fired up the engine, he couldn't shake the feeling that their actions had irrevocably escalated the conflict. The Raymonds now knew the threat that human super soldiers posed, and their retaliation would be swift and terrible. As the Nomad sped through the war-torn landscape, Cox set his jaw, his mind already racing ahead to their next move. The journey to Fortress Alpha would be perilous, but the fate of humanity now rested on their success. With the shield technology secured and their team intact, they raced towards their rendezvous point, keenly aware that the true test of Project Titan was yet to come. Come! As they sped towards the secret airfield, Cox's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of Raymond activity. Suddenly, he spotted a dark mass looming in the distance, blocking their path. "Damn it," he muttered, slowing the Nomad. "Everyone, eyes front. We've got a problem." The team leaned forward, taking in the sight before them. A massive Raymond blockade stretched across their route, a formidable barrier of Hex Titans, shimmering energy fields, and swarms of aerial drones. Chen let out a low whistle. They've locked down the entire area. Breaking through that would be suicide. Cox's mind raced, calculating their options. The hypersonic transport awaiting them at the airfield was their best shot at reaching Fortress Alpha. But with this blockade in place, they might as well be on the other side of the planet. "We need to change course," Cox announced, his hands already working the Nomad's controls. "I've got an idea." He steered the vehicle off their planned route, heading towards a cluster of overgrown buildings barely visible in the distance. As they drew closer, the team recognized the faded military insignias on the crumbling walls. "An old base?" Harper asked, leaning forward to get a better look. Cox nodded. "Abandoned years before the invasion, it was a testing ground for experimental aircraft. If we're lucky, we might find something we can use." The Nomad came to a stop at the edge of the derelict facility. Vegetation had reclaimed much of the infrastructure, nature asserting its dominance over the remnants of human military might. The team disembarked cautiously, weapons at the ready. "Chen, Rodriguez, secure the perimeter," Cox ordered. "Harper, you're with me. Let's see if this place has anything left worth salvaging." As Chen and Rodriguez fanned out to patrol the area, Cox and Harper made their way into the main complex. The corridors were dark and musty, filled with the debris of years of neglect. Their enhanced vision allowed them to navigate the gloom with ease, scanning for any signs of useful equipment. After several minutes of fruitless searching, Harper called out, "Major, over here. I think I've found something." Cox joined him at a heavy steel door, partially hidden behind a tangle of vines. With their combined strength, they managed to force it open, revealing a vast underground hangar. As they stepped inside, their eyes widened. In the center of the cavernous space sat a sleek, angular aircraft unlike anything they'd seen before. Its design spoke of speed and stealth, with vertical thrusters built into its wings. "A VTOL," Harper breathed, circling the craft with an appraising eye. "Prototype by the looks of it, probably abandoned when the base was decommissioned." Cox ran his hand along the aircraft's hull, his mind already formulating a plan. "Can you get it flying?" Harper hesitated, then nodded slowly. It's in rough shape, but with some work and maybe a bit of that Riemann tech we've salvaged, yeah, I think I can make it happen. As Harper began his assessment of the VTOL, Cox's comm unit crackled to life. Chen's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Sir, we've got company. A group of survivors holed up in one of the auxiliary buildings. They seem friendly, but we're keeping them contained for now." "Understood. We'll be right there." Cox and Harper made their way to Chen's position, where they found a small group of haggard-looking civilians. One woman stepped forward, her eyes sharp despite her disheveled appearance. "I'm Dr. Sarah Reeves," she said, her voice steady. "We've been hiding here since the invasion began. Who are you, and what are you doing here?" Cox quickly explained their situation, watching as Dr. Reeves' expression shifted from suspicion to excitement. "The VTOL," she said, her eyes lighting up. "You found it? I was part of the team that designed it. With my help, we can definitely get it operational." With Dr. Reeves and the other survivors assisting, the team set to work repairing and upgrading the experimental aircraft. Harper and Rodriguez focused on integrating the salvaged Riemann technology, while Dr. Reeves worked on bringing the VTOL's advanced systems back online. As they worked, Cox received another encrypted transmission from General Steele. The news was grim. Riemann forces had launched a massive assault on key human strongholds, including the area around Fortress Alpha. Their mission had just become even more critical. Night fell, bringing with it a new threat. The team's sensors picked up incoming Riemann scout ships, tracking the energy signature of the Nomad. "They found us," Cox announced, his voice cutting through the tension in the hangar. "We need to move, now." In a split-second decision, Cox programmed the Nomad to drive autonomously along a different route, hoping to draw away some of the Riemann forces. It was a gamble, but one that could buy them the time they needed to escape. As the sounds of approaching Riemann ships grew louder, the team made their final preparations. The shield technology components were carefully loaded onto the VTOL, and Dr. Reeves insisted on joining them, citing her intimate knowledge of the aircraft's systems. Harper took the pilot's seat with Dr. Reeves beside him as co-pilot. Cox, Chen, and Rodriguez manned the defensive systems, their enhanced reflexes primed for the challenge ahead. The hangar doors groaned open, revealing the night sky. In the distance, they could see the flashes of Riemann weapons as the aliens converged on the base. Harper fired up the VTOL's engines, their roar amplified by the newly integrated Riemann technology. As the first wave of Riemann attackers breached the base's perimeter, the VTOL lifted off. Its enhanced cloaking technology, a fusion of human ingenuity and alien advancement, shimmered into life. Harper piloted the craft low over the treetops, using every trick in his arsenal to evade detection. But as they soared towards their destination, a new challenge loomed on the horizon. The Riemann blockade they had initially avoided was expanding, threatening to cut off their access to the hidden airfield where the hypersonic transport awaited. Cox's eyes hardened as he assessed the situation. Even with their enhanced stealth capabilities, breaking through that blockade would push their skills and their improvised aircraft to the absolute limit. As they approached the expanding line of Riemann defenses, Cox knew that the true test of Project Titan was about to begin. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, dependent on their ability to breach the blockade and deliver the shield technology to Fortress Alpha. Harper's hands tightened on the controls, his enhanced senses working in perfect harmony with the VTOL systems. "Ready for this?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tension. Cox nodded, his eyes fixed on the looming Riemann forces ahead. "Let's show them what we're made of." With that, Harper pushed the VTOL's engines to their limit, and the aircraft surged forward, racing towards the heart of the Riemann blockade. Blockade, their experimental aircraft racing towards the heart of the Riemann defenses. The VTOL's engines roared as Harper pushed them to their limits, the craft's frame vibrating with the strain. Cox gripped his seat, eyes fixed on the approaching wall of Hex Titans and shimmering energy barriers. "Multiple contacts incoming," Chen reported, her voice tense as she monitored the sensors. "Riemann drones deploying from the Hex Titans." Harper's hands danced across the controls, initiating a series of evasive maneuvers that would have incapacitated a normal human pilot. The VTOL dipped and weaved, its enhanced stealth systems working overtime to mask their approach. In the co-pilot seat, Dr. Reeves's brow furrowed as she studied the readouts before her. Suddenly, her eyes widened. "Major Cox, I've found something. There's a pattern in the energy barrier's frequency modulation. It's creating a periodic weak point in their defenses." Cox leaned forward, studying the data. His enhanced mind quickly processed the information, formulating a plan. "Harper, adjust our course. Aim for these coordinates." He relayed the specifics of the weak point. Harper nodded, altering their trajectory. The VTOL banked hard, angling towards the newly identified vulnerability in the Riemann defenses. "Weapons hot," Cox ordered, moving to man one of the primary energy cannons. Chen took position at the other, while Rodriguez activated the makeshift electronic warfare suite. As they closed in on the barrier, swarms of Reman drones converged on their position. Energy bolts lit up the sky around them, the alien weapons seeking to obliterate the human intruders. "Now!" Cox shouted as they reached the weak point. Harper pushed the VTOL to its absolute limit. The aircraft shot forward, its newly integrated Riemann technology humming with power. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed as if they would crash into the solid wall of energy. Then, with a flash of light and a bone-jarring shudder, they burst through. Alarms blared across the Riemann network as they detected the breach. Waves of fighter drones peeled away from the Hex Titans, converging on the VTOL's position. Harper's exceptional skills were put to the test as he wove through the onslaught. The VTOL rolled and banked, narrowly avoiding streams of energy fire. Cox and Chen returned fire, their enhanced targeting abilities allowing them to pick off pursuing drones with surgical precision. Rodriguez's fingers flew over the controls of the electronic warfare suite. Riemann communications crackled and died, their coordination thrown into chaos. Drones collided mid-air, their synchronized attack patterns disrupted by the human countermeasures. As they fought their way deeper into Riemann territory, a massive shadow fell over the VTOL. Cox looked up to see a behemoth Riemann command ship emerging from behind the energy barrier, its weapons systems locking onto their position. "Evasive action," Cox barked. "Harper, take us down!" Without hesitation, Harper sent the VTOL into a steep dive. The sudden shift in altitude caused Cox's stomach to lurch, but his augmented physiology allowed him to maintain focus. Energy beams from the command ship seared the air where they had been moments before. The VTOL plummeted towards the ground, skimming the tops of craggy rock formations. Harper guided them into a narrow canyon, using the terrain for cover. The massive Raman vessel pursued, its bulk struggling to navigate the tight space. As they raced through the canyon, Dr. Reeves's voice cut through the tension. "The command ship's propulsion systems are vulnerable during sharp turns. If we can get behind it..." Cox's mind raced, quickly formulating a plan. "Harper, on my mark, I want you to execute a barrel roll. Bring us up and behind that ship." Harper nodded, his hands tightening on the controls. They approached a sharp bend in the canyon, the Riemann ship closing in behind them. "Now!" Cox shouted. Harper executed the maneuver flawlessly. The world spun around them as the VTOL rolled, shooting upwards just as the Riemann ship began its turn. For a brief moment, they found themselves directly behind the alien vessel, its propulsion systems exposed. Cox and Chen opened fire, their energy cannons targeting the vulnerable systems with deadly accuracy. Rodriguez maximized power to the electronic warfare suite, disrupting the ship's shields. The combined assault had an immediate effect. Explosions blossomed across the Raman ship's hull, its systems failing in a cascade of destruction. The massive vessel lost control, slamming into the canyon wall in a spectacular fireball. As the command ship's wreckage rained down around them, Harper guided the VTOL out of the canyon. The destruction of their command vessel had thrown the remaining Reman forces into disarray, creating a gap in their defenses large enough for the humans to slip through. "We're clear," Chen reported, her eyes still glued to the sensor readouts. "But we've got more incoming. Long-range scans show a massive wave of Riemann reinforcements heading our way." Cox's expression resolute. They had breached the blockade, but their mission was a long way to go. The race to reach the hidden airfield and the hypersonic transport that awaited them had just become even more urgent. "Harper, "Give us everything this bird's got," Cox ordered. "We need to reach that airfield before those reinforcements arrive." As the VTOL streaked across the war-torn landscape, Cox began preparations for their arrival. They would need to transfer the shield technology components quickly and be ready for a potential fight. The Raymans, now fully aware of the threat posed by the human super soldiers, would stop at nothing to prevent their escape. The hidden airfield came into view, the sleek form of the hypersonic transport visible on the runway. Its engines were already spooling up, preparing for an emergency takeoff. As Harper brought the VTOL in for a landing, Cox could see the first signs of the approaching Reman forces on the horizon. Time was running out. As the VTOL touched down beside the transport, Cox knew that the next few minutes would determine not just their fate, but potentially the fate of all humanity. The team raced to unload the vital shield technology, even as the sound of Riemann weapons fire grew ever closer. Closer. The team worked feverishly to transfer the shield technology components, their movements a blur of efficiency and urgency. As the last piece was secured, a deafening boom shook the air. Cox's head snapped up, his enhanced vision catching sight of a massive Riemann ship materializing through the cloud cover. "Everyone on board now," he shouted, gesturing toward the hypersonic transport. The team scrambled into the sleek aircraft, Harper taking the pilot's seat with practiced ease. The engines roared to life, drowning out the approaching whine of Reman weapons charging. "Strap in," Harper called out, his hands flying over the controls. "This is going to be close." The transport lurched forward, accelerating down the runway as energy beams from the Riemann ship seared the ground behind them. Cox felt the G-forces press him into his seat as Harper pushed the aircraft to its limits, the landscape outside blurring into a smear of color. For a moment, it seemed they might escape unscathed. Then a massive electromagnetic pulse erupted from the Riemann vessel, washing over the transport in a wave of invisible energy. Warning lights flashed across the cockpit as systems began to fail. Harper fought with the controls, his augmented reflexes the only thing keeping them airborne. "I've lost primary propulsion," he reported, his voice tight with concentration. Switching to emergency protocols. The transport began to lose altitude, the ground below rising up to meet them at an alarming rate. Cox watched as Harper's hands danced across the controls, coaxing every ounce of lift from the failing systems. "Brace for impact," Harper called out, his voice eerily calm. The transport hit the ground hard, skidding across a rocky plateau. Metal screamed as the fuselage dragged against stone, sparks flying past the windows. Cox's enhanced body absorbed the impact, but he could hear the others grunt in pain as they were thrown against their restraints. Finally, the transport ground to a halt, smoke rising from its battered frame. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the crackle of damaged electronics. Cox was the first to move, quickly assessing the situation. "Status report," he barked. One by one, the team responded. Miraculously, no one was seriously injured, though Chen sported a nasty gash on her forehead. Dr. Reeves was already examining the shield technology components. "The containment units held," she reported, relief evident in her voice. "The tech is intact." Cox nodded, his mind racing through their options. He moved to the cockpit where Harper was running diagnostics. "What's the damage?" Cox asked, though he already suspected the answer. Harper's face was grim. "Bad. The EMP fried most of our systems. We're not flying out of here." Cox's eyes sharp as he made the difficult decision. "We continue on foot." The team gathered around as Cox outlined their new plan. Dr. Reeves, her eyes bright with an idea, interrupted. "We can salvage some of the transport systems," she explained. "Create portable versions of our stealth and communication tech. It won't be as effective, but it's better than going in blind." Cox nodded his approval, and they set to work. Chen and Rodriguez provided security, their enhanced senses alert for any sign of Raymond pursuit. Meanwhile, Cox, Harper, and Dr. Reeves cannibalized the transport systems, constructing makeshift backpack devices. As they worked, the distant whine of Raymond's scout ships grew louder. Cox knew their time was running out. "We need to move," he announced, surveying their handiwork. The jury-rigged devices looked crude but functional. "We'll split up." Harper, you and Dr. Reeves take the shield tech. Head through the mountains. It's the most direct route. Chen, Rodriguez, you're with me. We'll create a diversion, draw their attention away from the primary package. He fixed Harper with an unwavering focus. No matter what happens, that tech has to reach Fortress Alpha. Understood? Harper nodded, the weight of the responsibility clear in his eyes. As the team prepared to separate, the sound of Riemann engines grew louder, echoing off the surrounding peaks. Move out, Cox ordered, his voice low and determined. Harper and Dr. Reeves set off toward a narrow mountain pass, the precious shield technology secure in their packs. Cox watched them go, then turned to Chen and Rodriguez. Let's give our friends something to chase, he said, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. They plunged into the dense forest at the base of the mountains, their enhanced bodies allowing them to move at speeds no normal human could match. Cox could hear the Riemann scouts overhead, searching for signs of their crash. Suddenly, Rodriguez held up a hand, signaling them to stop. Cox's enhanced hearing picked up what had alerted his teammate, the distinctive sound of Riemann ground forces moving through the underbrush. Cox signaled Chen and Rodriguez, outlining a quick plan of attack. They moved silently into position, their augmented muscles coiled and ready. The Riemann patrol burst into view, their alien forms a stark contrast to the earth forest around them. Cox gave the signal, and the three super soldiers exploded into action. Cox's fist connected with the nearest Riemann's head, the force of the blow sending the alien flying backward. Chen and Rodriguez were blurs of motion, their enhanced speed and strength allowing them to engage multiple enemies at once. The skirmish was over in seconds, but Cox knew it had served its purpose. The Riemann communication network would be buzzing with their location, drawing attention away from Harper and Dr. Reeves. "Move!" Cox ordered, and they were off again, pushing deeper into the wilderness. As night fell, new challenges emerged. Cox could hear the distinctive whir of Riemann night hunting units, their specialized sensors probing the darkness. He pushed his team harder, knowing that every second counted. A stray energy bolt sizzled past Chen's head, singeing her hair. She stumbled, crying out in pain as she wrenched her ankle on a hidden root. "Contact 3 o'clock!" Rodriguez shouted, returning fire with his salvaged Raman weapon. Cox scooped up Chen, her weight insignificant to his enhanced strength. "Find us cover," he ordered Rodriguez. They sprinted through the forest, energy bolts lighting up the night around them. Rodriguez spotted a small cave entrance, barely visible behind a curtain of vines. As they ducked inside, Cox gently set Chen down, quickly assessing her injury. The ankle was swollen but not broken. He applied a quick field dressing, his enhanced dexterity making the task effortless. "We'll rest here for an hour," Cox decided, knowing they needed to regroup and allow Chen's augmented healing to take effect. "Then we move again. We need to keep their attention on us for as long as possible." As Rodriguez kept watch at the cave entrance, Cox's mind turned to Harper and Dr. Reeves. He hoped they were making good progress through the mountains. Everything depended on their success. Little did he know, Harper and Dr. Reeves were at that moment facing their own life-or-death challenge high in the snow-covered peaks, with the fate of humanity hanging quite literally by a thread. The mountainous terrain had proven treacherous, and they found themselves precariously balanced on a narrow ledge, the shield technology components weighing heavily on their backs. Harper's enhanced reflexes were the only thing that saved them as a section of the ledge crumbled away beneath their feet. He grabbed Dr. Reeves's arm, pulling her back from the brink as loose rocks tumbled into the abyss below. "That was too close," Dr. Reeves gasped, her face pale beneath her windburned cheeks. Harper nodded grimly. "We need to find another way. This path is too unstable." They backtracked carefully, eventually discovering a small cave that offered temporary shelter from the biting wind and treacherous terrain. As they caught their breath, Harper's enhanced hearing picked up the faint whine of Raymond's scout ships in the distance. "They're getting closer," he warned. "We need to move soon." Dr. Reeves nodded, her mind already racing through possible solutions. "Wait," she said suddenly, her eyes lighting up with an idea. "The shield technology, we might be able to use it to mask our presence from their sensors." Working quickly, they jury-rigged a small-scale version of the shield generator, creating a bubble of energy that enveloped them both. As they emerged from the cave, the whine of Raman engines grew louder, but the ships passed overhead without detecting them. Meanwhile, Cox, Chen, and Rodriguez had successfully drawn the bulk of the Riemann forces away from Harper and Dr. Reeves' position. They moved through the dense forest with practiced ease, their enhanced bodies allowing them to cover ground at an inhuman pace. As they neared the edge of the tree line, the full scale of the conflict became apparent. Fortress Alpha loomed in the distance, its massive walls barely visible through the haze of smoke and weapons fire that filled the valley. Riemann forces swarmed across the battlefield, their alien war machines carving paths of destruction through the human defenses. Cox surveyed the chaos, his tactically augmented mind quickly assessing the situation. A frontal assault would be suicide, he muttered, his eyes scanning for any weakness in the Riemann lines. Chen nodded in agreement. We need a way to slip through undetected. Rodriguez, who had been fiddling with their salvage communication device, spoke up. I might have an idea. If we can boost the signal from this thing, we might be able to tap into the Riemann command network, use their own communications against them. Cox considered the proposal for a moment before nodding his approval. Do it. In the meantime, we need to find a way to draw more of their forces away from the fortress. As Rodriguez worked on the communication device, Cox outlined his plan. They would split into two groups once again. Cox and Chen would attempt to infiltrate the Riemann lines using their augmented abilities and whatever stealth technology they could salvage, while Harper and Rodriguez would create a diversion to draw attention away from their approach. Just as they were about to put their plan into action, a massive Riemann warship materialized in the sky above Fortress Alpha. Its size dwarfed anything they had seen before, and the energy readings emanating from it sent a chill down Cox's spine. That's not good, Chen breathed, her eyes wide as she stared up at the behemoth. Cox's mind raced, quickly adapting their strategy to this new threat. Change of plans, he announced. We need to get to that ship and take it out. It's the only way to give Fortress Alpha a fighting chance. As they prepared to move out, Cox couldn't help but wonder about Harper and Dr. Reeves. He hoped they had made it through the mountains safely, but there was no time to dwell on it now. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and they were the only ones who could tip the scales. With a nod to his team, Cox led the charge towards the heart of the Riemann forces. Their enhanced bodies blurred into motion, weaving through the chaos of the battlefield with inhuman speed and precision. Energy bolts sizzled past them as Riemann troops caught sight of their advance. But Cox and his team were always one step ahead, their augmented reflexes allowing them to dodge and weave through the barrage. As they neared the center of the valley, Rodriguez's voice crackled over their comms. I've got access to their network, he reported, sending false orders now. With any luck, we'll have them chasing ghosts all over the battlefield. Cox allowed himself a grim smile. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As they pushed forward, the massive Riemann warship loomed ever larger overhead, its weapons systems beginning to power up with an ominous hum that vibrated through the air. Time was running out. Cox knew that their next moves would determine not just their fate, but the fate of all humanity. With a silent prayer for Harper and Dr. Reeves, wherever they were, he signaled his team to make their final push towards the heart of the Riemann forces. Invasion. With a final nod to his team, Cox led the charge towards the heart of the Riemann forces. They had barely covered 50 meters when a deafening roar filled the air. A battered Riemann scout ship careened through the sky, trailing smoke and debris. It slammed into the ground less than 100 meters from their position, carving a deep furrow in the earth. Cox signaled for his team to take cover, his enhanced vision scanning the wreckage for any signs of movement. To his surprise, a figure emerged from the twisted metal, stumbling but clearly alive. Hold your fire, Cox ordered as recognition dawned. It's Colonel Zarketh. The Riemann officer they had interrogated earlier in the conflict staggered towards them, his alien features contorted in what Cox interpreted as pain or exhaustion. I seek an end to this madness, Zarketh rasped, his translator struggling to keep up with his labored breathing. I can help you infiltrate our lines. Cox's mind raced, weighing the potential benefits against the risks. Why should we trust you? Zarketh's multifaceted eyes fixed on Cox. Because if we do not act now, both our species face annihilation. After a moment of tense silence, Cox nodded. All right, but one wrong move and you're done. Understood? The Ramen officer dipped his head in acknowledgement. There is a weakness in our assault formation, a corridor of lighter defenses leading to a secondary entrance of your fortress. As Zarketh outlined the route, Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. Cox, we've got incoming. Something big. A massive shape loomed on the horizon, its silhouette unlike anything they had encountered before. As it drew closer, Cox could make out its form, a colossal, spider-like walker, overflowing with energy weapons. Gravity manipulation field, Zarketh hissed. Conventional attacks will be useless. Cox's tactically augmented mind quickly formulated a plan. Chen Rodriguez, we need to plant modified shield tech on that thing's weak points. Harper, Dr. Reeves, you're with me on distraction duty. The team sprang into action. Cox, Harper, and Dr. Reeves unleashed a barrage of fire, drawing the walker's attention. Its legs moved with uncanny precision, each step warping the gravity around it. Chen and Rodriguez darted between its massive limbs, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to navigate the fluctuating gravitational field. Dr. Reeves stumbled, nearly falling as the ground seemed to shift beneath her feet. Harper reacted instantly, wrapping an arm around her waist and anchoring her with his augmented strength. I've got you, he assured her. Keep analyzing that thing's systems. Dr. Reeves nodded, her eyes never leaving the walker, as she called out observations. The field seems to fluctuate in a predictable pattern. If we time it right. Zarketh's voice cut through the chaos. The joint where the leg meets the body. It's a blind spot in the field generator's coverage. With this crucial information, Chen and Rodriguez maneuvered into position. In a display of superhuman coordination, they planted the modified shield components at precisely the right moment. Now, Dr. Reeves, Cox shouted. She activated the devices remotely. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing, the walker's gravity field collapsed. The massive machine teetered, its legs buckling under its own immense weight before crashing to the ground with an earth-shaking impact. The team barely had time to catch their breath before the sky filled with Riemann fighter craft, drawn by the walker's destruction. Move, Cox ordered, leading them towards the ruins of a destroyed human outpost. As energy bolts rained down around them, Cox made a split-second decision. Harper, Dr. Reeves, take the shield tech and make for the fortress. We'll hold them here. Harper's eyes widened. But, sir... That's an order, soldier. The mission comes first. With visible reluctance, Harper and Dr. Reeves broke away from the group, sprinting towards Fortress Alpha with their precious cargo. Cox turned to his remaining team members and Zarketh. All right, let's give them something to shoot at. The battle that ensued was unlike anything Cox had ever experienced. His team moved with superhuman speed and precision, their augmented bodies pushing beyond normal human limits. Zarketh proved his worth, calling out Raymond tactics and weak points. But the odds were overwhelming. Wave after wave of Riemann troops descended upon their position. Chen took a hit protecting Rodriguez, the energy blast searing through her enhanced armor. As Cox helped Chen to cover, his comm crackled to life. Harper's voice came through, distorted and frantic. Sir, we've reached the outskirts of the fortress, but we're pinned down. Riemann ambush, we can't... The transmission cut off abruptly. Cox's mind raced. The mission, the shield tech, the fate of humanity. It all hung in the balance. And now he faced an impossible choice. Attempt a rescue or press on with their original objective. His eyes fell on a damaged Ramen transport ship nearby, miraculously intact amidst the chaos. A plan began to form, as daring as it was desperate. Zarketh, Cox called out, his voice cutting through the din of battle. How fast can you get that ship in the air? Air? Cox asked, his eyes fixed on the Riemann officer. Zarketh's multifaceted eyes narrowed as he assessed the damaged transport. With some minor adjustments, it should be operational within minutes. Cox nodded sharply. Chen, Rodriguez, secure that ship. Zarketh, you're with me. We'll cover you. The team moved with practiced efficiency. Chen and Rodriguez sprinted towards the transport, their augmented bodies allowing them to close the distance in seconds. Cox and Zarketh took up defensive positions, laying down suppressing fire against the advancing Remen forces. The air crackled with energy bolts as Cox's enhanced reflexes allowed him to pick off Remen soldiers with precision. Beside him, Zarketh proved his worth, calling out enemy positions and weak points in their formation. "Cox," Chen's voice cut through the comms. "We've secured the ship, but there's minimal crew inside. We've neutralized them." "Good work," Cox responded. "Zarketh, get to the cockpit. We need your expertise on those controls." As Zarketh made his way to the transport, Cox provided covering fire. The Remen officer's knowledge of the ship's systems proved invaluable as he quickly brought the engines online. The transport hummed to life, its anti-gravity generators lifting it off the ground. Cox leapt aboard just as the hatch was closing, narrowly avoiding a barrage of enemy fire. Inside the ship, Cox's tactically augmented mind quickly formulated a plan. "Zarketh, can you use the Remen identification codes to get us through their checkpoints?" The Remen officer nodded, his fingers dancing across the alien controls. "Affirmative, but we must act quickly. They will soon realize this ship has been compromised." Cox turned to his team. "Our primary objective remains unchanged. We need to get to Fortress Alpha with the shield technology. Harper and Dr. Reeves are on their own for now." Chen and Rodriguez exchanged worried glances, but nodded in agreement. The mission came first. As Zarketh piloted the transport through the chaotic battlefield, Cox used his tactical expertise to guide them past the heaviest concentrations of Remen forces. The ship's Remen codes allowed them to pass through several checkpoints undetected, bringing them closer to their goal. Suddenly, a faint signal caught Cox's attention. He rushed to the transport's sensor array, his enhanced senses picking up a weak distress call. "It's Harper," Cox announced, his voice tight. "They're pinned down near the fortress outskirts." The team's faces showed a mix of relief and concern. Cox's mind raced, weighing their options. The mission was paramount, but leaving Harper and Dr. Reeves behind could jeopardize everything. "Zarketh, can you get us low over their position?" Cox asked. The Remen officer nodded, already adjusting their course. The transport's energy shields should provide temporary cover from the ambush. Cox turned to Chen and Rodriguez. "Prepare for a rapid extraction. We'll have one shot at this." As they approached Harper and Dr. Reeves's location, the transport's sensors lit up with enemy signatures. Remen forces had surrounded the two, their energy weapons peppering the makeshift cover. Zarketh brought the transport in low, the shield creating a protective bubble around them. Chen and Rodriguez positioned themselves at the open hatch, their enhanced strength ready for the extraction. The moment the transport hovered over Harper and Dr. Reeves, Chen and Rodriguez moved with superhuman speed. They reached down, grasping their teammates and pulling them aboard in one fluid motion. "We've got them!" Rodriguez shouted as the hatch sealed shut. Cox's relief was short-lived as he saw Harper's condition. The soldier had sustained a severe injury during the ambush, his augmented body struggling to compensate. Dr. Reeves immediately set to work, her hands steady as she began emergency treatment with the limited medical supplies available. "The shield components are secure," she reported between actions, "but Harper needs more advanced care soon." Cox nodded grimly. "Zarketh, get us to Fortress Alpha." Now! The transport surged forward, but their actions had not gone unnoticed. The Remen command structure, realizing the significance of the rogue ship, diverted a significant portion of their forces to intercept. Multiple Remen fighter craft converged on their position, unleashing a barrage of energy weapons. The transport rocked under the assault, its shields flickering dangerously. "Shields at 60% and dropping," Chen reported, her voice tense. Cox's mind raced, analyzing the situation. His enhanced tactical processing identified a potential weak point in the Remen formation. "Zarketh, see those defense towers?" Cox pointed to a cluster of Remen ground-to-air structures. "Fly directly towards them." The Remen officer's eyes widened in understanding, his piloting skills put to the test as he navigated through the intense fire. "Rodriguez, on my mark, target the weak points in those tower structures," Cox ordered. As they approached the towers, Cox waited for the perfect moment. "Now!" Rodriguez unleashed the transport's weapons, his augmented reflexes allowing for pinpoint accuracy. The resulting explosions created a massive debris field, temporarily disrupting the pursuing Raymond fighters. Taking advantage of the chaos, Zarketh piloted the transport through a narrow gap in Fortress Alpha's perimeter defenses. The human defenders, recognizing the Riemann vessel, responded with immediate hostility. "This is Lieutenant Cox," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Authorization code Sierra Tango 937. We have the shield technology and wounded. Request immediate clearance and medical support." There was a tense moment of silence before General Steele's voice crackled through the comms. "Cox, you magnificent bastard. Get your team inside now. We've got bigger problems." As the transport touched down in a secure hangar, alarms blared throughout the facility. Cox helped carry Harper out of the ship, his eyes meeting Dr. Reeves's worried gaze. "What's happening?" Cox asked as medical teams rushed to their aid. General Steele's face was grim as he approached. "The second Riemann warship just entered Earth's atmosphere. It's carrying a planet-destroying weapon, and we have less than an hour before it's fully charged." Cox looked at his battered team, then at the shield components they'd fought so hard to retrieve. The real battle, it seemed, was just beginning. Cox's mind raced, the gravity of the situation settling heavily upon him. "We need a plan, and fast," he said, turning to face his team and General Steele. The war room buzzed with activity as holographic displays flickered to life, showing the approaching Riemann warship and Earth's dwindling defenses. Cox's augmented eyes scanned the data, his tactical mind processing the information at superhuman speed. Zarketh stepped forward, his alien features set in unyielding commitment. "There's a weakness we can exploit," he said, manipulating the holographic display. "The planet-destroying weapon requires an enormous amount of energy to charge. This process creates a vulnerable point in the ship's hull where excess heat is vented." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Cox leaned in, studying the hologram intently. "If we could target that weak spot precisely, we could potentially disable the weapon or destroy the entire vessel," Zarketh finished. General Steele's eyes narrowed. "It's a long shot, but it might be our only chance. Cox, what do you propose?" Cox's mind worked furiously, formulating a plan. "A two-pronged assault," he said finally. "We launch a diversionary attack to draw their defenses, then follow with a precision strike on the heat venting system." As the team discussed the details of the plan, Dr. Reeves burst into the war room, her face flushed with excitement. "We've done it," she announced. "We've successfully integrated the shield technology with Fortress Alpha's power grid." A collective sigh of relief filled the room, but Dr. Reeves held up her hand. "There's a catch. The energy requirements for a global shield are too great. We can only protect a limited area around the fortress." Cox's teeth gritted. This new information narrowed their window for success significantly. He quickly adjusted the plan in his mind, factoring in the limited shield coverage. General Steele nodded grimly. "It'll have to do. Cox, I'm authorizing you to form an elite strike team for this mission. Choose your personnel carefully." As Cox selected his team, Chen, Rodriguez, and a handful of seasoned Special Forces operators, Zarketh approached him. "I volunteer to join your mission," the Raymond said. "My knowledge of our ship layouts could prove invaluable." Cox hesitated for a moment, weighing the potential risks and benefits. Finally, he nodded. "All right, you're in. But remember, the fate of Earth rests on this mission. We can't afford any mistakes." As the strike team made final preparations, alarms blared throughout the fortress. Cox rushed to the sensor array, his enhanced vision taking in the data in an instant. "General," he called out, "we've got another problem. The remaining Riemann ground forces are mobilizing for an all-out assault on Fortress Alpha." General Steele's face hardened. "They're coordinating their attack with the warship. We'll have to split our defenses." Cox's mind raced, calculating odds and probabilities. The situation was dire, but there was no time for doubt. He turned to his team. "Let's move. Our window of opportunity is closing fast." They boarded a specially modified stealth shuttle, its sleek form barely visible even to Cox's enhanced vision. As the engines hummed to life, Dr. Reeves approached Cox one last time. The shield will only hold against the warship's weapon for a few minutes once it's fully charged, she said, her voice tight with concern. You'll need perfect timing. Cox nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. We'll make it count. The shuttle lifted off, quickly ascending through the atmosphere. As they broke through the cloud cover, the massive Raymond warship came into view. Its hull bristled with weapons, dwarfing anything humanity had ever constructed. Zarketh guided them through the warship's sensor blind spots, his knowledge proving invaluable as they navigated the treacherous approach. The tension inside the shuttle was palpable, every team member acutely aware of the stakes. Suddenly, alarms blared inside the craft. Cox's eyes snapped to the sensor readouts, his heart sinking as he processed the information. Our cloak is down, he announced grimly. A stray energy pulse from the charging weapon disrupted the field. The effect was immediate. The Raymond warship's defenses sprang to life, launching squadrons of fighter craft to intercept them. Evasive maneuvers, Cox ordered. The shuttle lurched as the pilot pushed its enhanced engines to their limits. Chen and Rodriguez manned the defensive systems, their augmented reflexes allowing them to hold off the initial wave of attackers. Energy bolts flashed past the viewports as the shuttle weaved through the onslaught. Cox's comm crackled to life, General Steele's voice cutting through the chaos. Cox, the Riemann ground forces have begun their assault. Our defenses are straining. The shield, it's fluctuating. We can't hold out much longer. Time seemed to slow as Cox processed their options, his enhanced mind working overtime. With a sinking feeling, he realized there was only one path forward. New plan, he announced, his voice steady despite the gravity of his decision. We're setting a collision course for the heat venting system. This shuttle is now our projectile. A stunned silence fell over the team, broken only by the continued barrage from the Riemann fighters outside. Sir, Chen began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. That's a suicide mission. Cox met her gaze, his drive unwavering. It's the only way to ensure we hit our target. I'm ordering the rest of you to evacuate using the escape pods. I'll stay behind to pilot the shuttle. A fierce argument erupted, with Chen and Rodriguez refusing to abandon their leader. The seconds ticked by, each one bringing Earth closer to destruction. Finally, Cox relented. All right. One other person can stay to increase our chances of success. The rest of you, evacuate now. That's an order. As the team scrambled to the escape pods, Cox turned to Chen. You're with me. Let's save the world. The escape pods jettisoned, leaving Cox and Chen alone in the shuttle. They locked eyes for a moment, a lifetime of unspoken words passing between them. Course laid in, Cox said, his hands flying over the controls. Let's finish this. The shuttle streaked towards the warship's vulnerable spot, alarms blaring as the Riemann weapon reached critical levels. Earth's fate now rested on their ability to strike their target before the devastating weapon could fire. Cox and Chen braced for impact as the shuttle hurtled towards the heat venting system. The warship loomed larger in their viewport, its point defenses opening fire in a desperate attempt to stop them. Energy bolts sizzled past, the shuttle shuddering under near misses. As they closed in on their target, Cox allowed himself one final thought. No matter the outcome, humanity had fought to the very end. With unshakable focus, he and Chen prepared for the moment of impact, carrying with them the last hope for Earth's survival. Survival. The shuttle hurtled towards its target, growing larger in the viewport with each passing second. Impact in 3, 2, 1. Cox's voice was steady as he guided the craft to its final destination. The collision was violent and deafening. Metal screamed against metal as the shuttle tore through the warship's heat venting system. Cox and Chen were thrown forward, their restraints barely holding them in place as the cockpit crumpled around them. For a moment all was silent. Then a thunderous explosion rocked the warship. The weapon's charging process, disrupted by the impact, cascaded into a catastrophic overload. Chain reactions rippled through the massive vessel, secondary explosions blossoming across its hull like deadly flowers. Inside the escape pods, the rest of Cox's team watched in awe as the Raymond warship began to break apart. Their relief was short-lived, however, as they found themselves suddenly engulfed in a dangerous debris field. Rodriguez gripped the manual controls of his pod, his augmented reflexes pushed to their limits. He weaved through the chaos, narrowly avoiding collision with massive chunks of alien metal. Come on, he muttered, his eyes darting between the view screen and the rapidly changing trajectory data. The other pods weren't faring as well, their navigation systems struggling to cope with the unpredictable patterns of the debris. Zarketh, in one of the trailing pods, braced himself as a piece of shrapnel glanced off their hull, sending them into a nauseating spin. On the ground, the situation at Fortress Alpha was growing increasingly dire. General Steele's face was a mask of concentration as he directed the defense from the command center. Holographic displays showed the shield flickering dangerously under the combined assault of Raymond ground forces and falling debris. "Redirect power to Sector 7, Steele barked, pointing to a weakening section of the perimeter. "And get those anti-air batteries online. We can't let any more debris breach the shield." As the battle raged around the fortress, the escape pods began their fiery descent through Earth's atmosphere. Rodriguez's pod, thanks to his skillful piloting, cut a clean arc towards Fortress Alpha. The others, damaged and off course, scattered across the war-torn landscape. Rodriguez's pod slammed into the ground with bone-jarring force, skidding to a halt just outside the fortress's defensive perimeter. He emerged, disoriented but unharmed, to find himself in the midst of a raging battle. Raman warriors swarmed nearby, engaged in fierce combat with human defenders. Drawing his sidearm, Rodriguez began fighting his way towards the fortress. His augmented strength and reflexes allowed him to move with deadly efficiency, dropping Raymond's soldiers with precision shots as he advanced. Across the battlefield, the other pods had landed in various states of disarray. Zarketh found himself separated from the human soldiers, surrounded by his former comrades. Without hesitation, he engaged them in combat, his intimate knowledge of Riemann tactics proving invaluable as he fought to survive and reach Fortress Alpha. Inside the fortress, Dr. Reeves and her team worked feverishly to modify the shield technology. Holographic simulations flickered around them, showing various potential outcomes of their work. "If we invert the shield's energy signature here," Dr. Reeves explained, manipulating the hologram, "we might be able to create a disruption field that could disable Riemann ships as they enter the atmosphere." Her team nodded, fingers flying over control panels as they implemented the changes. The entire room hummed with nervous energy, everyone acutely aware that their work might be Earth's last hope. Outside, the battle reached a fever pitch. Human and Raymond forces clashed in desperate combat, the air filled with the crack of gunfire and the hum of energy weapons. Super soldiers, their bodies pushing the limits of human capability, turned the tide wherever they appeared. They moved with blinding speed, taking on multiple Riemann warriors simultaneously and inspiring nearby human troops with their incredible feats. As Rodriguez fought his way closer to the fortress, he spotted a group of soldiers clustered around a piece of wreckage. His heart leapt as he recognized the twisted remains of the shuttle he had last seen carrying Cox and Chen. Fighting through a knot of Raymond warriors, Rodriguez reached the group. "Status!" he shouted over the din of battle. A soldier turned, revealing an unconscious Chen cradled in his arms. "Found her in the wreckage, sir. She's alive but badly injured." Rodriguez nodded, his mind racing. "Form up! We're getting her back to the fortress." As they began to move, Rodriguez cast one last look at the shuttle wreckage. There was no sign of Cox. Pushing down the surge of emotion, he focused on the task at hand. They had to reach the safety of Fortress Alpha. Inside the command center, General Steele received the news of the team's survival with grim satisfaction. "Initiate Operation Hammer," he ordered, his voice carrying across the bustling room. "All available forces, push back against the Reman assault, create a corridor for our people to get home." The counteroffensive surged forward, a wave of human persistence crashing against the Raman lines. Reserve units joined the fray, alongside hastily repaired vehicles that belched smoke but still fought on. The super soldiers led the charge, their enhanced abilities allowing them to punch through the toughest Riemann defenses. As the battle raged, Dr. Reeves and her team completed the final modifications to the shield technology. She looked up at General Steele, her face a mixture of hope and fear. "It's ready, sir. but we won't know if it works until we try it. Steele nodded gravely. Understood, Doctor. Stand by to activate on my command. On the long-range sensors, the remaining Riemann fleet appeared as a swarm of angry red dots, drawing ever closer to Earth. The first ships began to enter the upper atmosphere, their hulls glowing with the heat of re-entry. Inside Fortress Alpha, defenders and newly arrived survivors alike braced themselves for what could be humanity's final stand. The modified shield hummed with potential energy, ready to be activated, as Riemann ships descended from the sky and their ground forces pressed their attack. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, waiting for the moment that would decide the future of humanity. Humanity's survival. The tension in the command center was palpable as General Steele gave the order. Activate the inverted shield, now! Dr. Reeves took a deep breath and pressed the activation sequence. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then a low hum filled the air, growing in intensity until it vibrated through the very foundations of Fortress Alpha. Outside, a massive wave of energy burst forth from the fortress, expanding rapidly into the upper atmosphere. The sky lit up with an otherworldly glow as the inverted shield took effect. On the long-range sensors, the swarm of red dots representing the Riemann fleet began to flicker and fade. It's working, Dr. Reeves exclaimed, her eyes wide as she studied the readouts. The Riemann ships are losing power. General Steele leaned forward, his gaze fixed on the holographic display. Dozens of Riemann vessels, caught in the shield's energy field, lost altitude and began plummeting towards Earth. Fiery streaks illuminated the sky as the alien ships burned up in the atmosphere, their debris raining down harmlessly over the ocean. The effect on the ground battle was immediate. Human soldiers, witnessing the destruction of the Riemann fleet, let out a thunderous cheer. The super soldiers, who had been fighting their way towards Fortress Alpha, seized the moment to launch a devastating counterattack. Chen, barely recovered from her injuries, joined Rodriguez and the others in spearheading the assault. Their enhanced bodies moved with fluid grace, tearing through Riemann defensive lines with unprecedented speed and efficiency. "Push forward!" Rodriguez shouted, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "We've got them on the run!" The Riemann ground forces, suddenly cut off from their orbital support, found themselves in disarray. Their communication systems, linked to the now disabled fleet, sputtered and died. Alien warriors who had been pressing their attack with confidence mere moments ago now found themselves isolated and vulnerable. As the human counteroffensive gained momentum, Rodriguez spotted an opportunity. A partially intact Riemann command vehicle lay abandoned nearby, its alien crew having fled in the chaos. "Zarketh!" Rodriguez called out, gesturing towards the vehicle. "We need your expertise." The Riemann defector nodded, understanding immediately. Together, they fought their way to the command vehicle, Chen and the other super soldiers providing cover fire. Inside the alien craft, Zarketh's fingers flew over the unfamiliar controls. "The systems are damaged, but I believe I can access their databanks," he said, his voice tense with concentration. Moments later, the vehicle's holographic display flickered to life, revealing a wealth of tactical information. Rodriguez's eyes widened as he took in the scope of the Riemann invasion plan. "They've got forward operating bases all over the globe," he muttered, studying the map. "And look here, a central command structure coordinating everything." Back in Fortress Alpha, Dr. Reeves and her team worked feverishly to stabilize the inverted shield technology. Warning lights flashed across her console, indicating the immense strain on the fortress's power systems. "We need to reroute power from non-essential systems," she ordered, her fingers dancing across the controls. "If we don't stabilize this soon, we'll lose the shield entirely." As the battle raged on and the science team fought to maintain their technological advantage, long-range sensors picked up a new disturbance. General Steele's face paled as he processed the information. "We've got another bogey incoming," he announced, his voice grave. "Much bigger than anything we've seen so far." The command center fell silent as a massive Riemann vessel emerged from hyperspace, dwarfing even the destroyed warship. It took up position just beyond the range of the inverted shield, its presence ominous and threatening. Zarketh, having returned with Rodriguez and the intelligence from the command vehicle, gasped when he saw the new arrival. "That's the Supreme Commander's flagship," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and fear. If it's here, the Raymonds are committing everything to this invasion. General Steele's mind raced, processing the new tactical reality. The super soldier team, initially slated for strike missions against the Raymond bases, now represented Earth's best hope for dealing with this new threat. "Rodriguez," Steele called out, his voice cutting through the tension in the command center. "I need options. How do we take out that flagship?" As Rodriguez began to outline a high-risk plan to infiltrate the Supreme Commander's vessel, Dr. Reeves approached the general, her face etched with concern. "Sir, I've managed to stabilize the shield for now," she reported, "but I've discovered a critical flaw. We can't maintain it indefinitely. By my calculations, we have 48 hours at most before it fails completely." The gravity of the situation settled over the room. With the clock now ticking, Earth's defenders faced an impossible choice: proceed with the plan to disrupt Raymond ground operations, or attempt a desperate mission to neutralize the looming threat in orbit. As the super soldier team prepared for what could be their final mission, technicians readied a specially modified stealth transport. The hybrid craft, incorporating the best of human and captured Raymond technology, represented their best chance at approaching the flagship undetected. Rodriguez looked at his team, Chen, still bearing the marks of her near-fatal encounter with the Raymond warship, Zarketh, the Raymond defector who had proved his loyalty time and again, and the other super soldiers, each a pinnacle of human enhancement and dedication. "We all know the stakes," Rodriguez said as they boarded the transport. "Whatever happens up there, we're Earth's last line of defense. Let's make it count." The transport's engines hummed to life, barely audible thanks to the stealth systems. As it lifted off from Fortress Alpha, disappearing into the night sky, those left behind could only watch and hope. The fate of humanity now rested in the hands of a small team of enhanced soldiers, hurtling towards a confrontation that would decide the future of Earth. The transport carrying Rodriguez and his team disappeared into the night sky, leaving behind a tense silence at Fortress Alpha. As they ascended through the atmosphere, the gravity of their mission took a toll on each member of the elite squad. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the team's secure comm channel. "All right, listen up. We're approaching the first Raymond forward operating base. Stay sharp and—" His words were cut short as the transport's sensor panel lit up with urgent warnings. Chen, monitoring the systems, frowned as he studied the readouts. "Sir, we've got a problem," he reported, his fingers flying over the controls. "I'm detecting an unfamiliar energy signature from the base. It's like they've adapted their tech to counter our stealth systems." Rodriguez cursed under his breath. "Cox, what's our status?" At the helm, Cox's face was illuminated by the soft glow of the instrument panel. "We're still undetected for now, but if we get any closer, that's going to change real fast." The team exchanged glances, years of training and shared experiences, allowing them to communicate volumes without a word. Rodriguez nodded, making a split-second decision. "Change of plans. Cox, find us a landing zone, several clicks out from the base. We're going in on foot." As Cox maneuvered the transport to a secluded clearing nestled between craggy peaks, the team quickly gathered their gear. Each member shouldered packs laden with specialized equipment designed to disrupt Raymond communications and defensive systems. The moment the transport touched down, the squad disembarked, their movements fluid and practiced. The chill mountain air bit at their exposed skin, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled interior of the ship. "Move out," Rodriguez ordered, taking point as they began their trek through the rugged terrain. Their enhanced bodies allowed them to cover ground at an impressive pace, scaling steep inclines and navigating treacherous paths with ease. But even with their augmented abilities, the journey was grueling. Jagged rocks tore at their boots, and the thin mountain air burned in their lungs. As they neared the perimeter of the Raymond base, Zarketh held up a closed fist, signaling the team to halt. His eyes, more attuned to Raymond technology than his human counterparts, had spotted something. "Sensor drones," he whispered, pointing to barely visible specks moving in a grid pattern above the base. "They've created a detection net. Very advanced." Chen moved forward, pulling out a compact device from his pack. "I can work with that," he said, a hint of confidence in his voice. "Give me a few minutes." The team took up defensive positions as Chen went to work, his fingers dancing over the device's interface. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold, the intensity of his concentration evident in every line of his body. After what felt like an eternity, Chen looked up. "I've got a window. 30 seconds. Starting now." Without hesitation, the team surged forward, crossing the invisible barrier of the drone network. They reached the outer walls of the base just as Chen's device beeped softly, signaling the end of their window. Rodriguez quickly divided the team. "Cox, Chen, you're with me. We're heading for the central command. The rest of you, plant those charges. You know the drill." As the team split up, Cox led the way into the base proper. The interior was a maze of alien architecture, all smooth curves and bioluminescent surfaces. They encountered their first Riemann patrol at an intersection of corridors. The fight was brief and brutal. Rodriguez's enhanced reflexes allowed him to disarm the first Riemann before it could raise an alarm. Cox and Chen moved in perfect sync, their augmented strength making short work of the remaining aliens. As they approached the command center, the distinct hum of powerful equipment grew louder. Cox held up a hand, signaling the others to stop, then peered around a corner. "We've got a problem," he whispered. "That's not just a command center. It's a long-range communication array. Taking it out could cripple their entire command structure." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Then that's our new primary objective. Chen, get in there and see what intel you can pull. Cox and I will handle the sabotage." As Chen set to work on the Raymond computer systems, his fingers flying over the alien interface, Rodriguez and Cox began the delicate process of overloading the array's power core. Suddenly, their comms crackled to life with an urgent transmission from Fortress Alpha. General Steele's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Rodriguez, situation's changed. The Supreme Commander's flagship is launching dropships. Hundreds of them, each packed with troops. Our defenses can't hold against those numbers." Cox and Rodriguez exchanged a look, years of shared combat experience allowing them to come to the same conclusion simultaneously. "Sir," Rodriguez responded, "requesting permission to alter mission parameters. We can use one of those dropships to infiltrate the flagship directly." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the comm. Then, "Permission granted. Godspeed, soldier." As Chen finished extracting data from the Riemann systems, the team regrouped and quickly made their way to the base's landing pad. The sight that greeted them was chaotic. Several dropships were being prepped for launch, with Raymond troops boarding in orderly lines. "There," Cox pointed to a ship on the far end of the pad. "That one's almost ready to go." The team moved with practiced efficiency, their enhanced abilities allowing them to cut through the Riemann defenses seamlessly. Within moments, they had secured the dropship, with Chen taking the pilot's seat. As the captured vessel lifted off, the explosives planted throughout the base detonated. The Raymond communication array collapsed in on itself, sending a shockwave of confusion through the alien forces. The dropship ascended rapidly, joining the swarm of vessels heading towards the massive flagship looming in low orbit. As Earth's atmosphere gave way to the star-studded blackness of space, Rodriguez looked at his team. "This is it," he said, his voice steady. "Whatever happens up there, we're Earth's last line of defense. Let's make it count." The dropship continued its ascent, carrying the fate of humanity with it as it approached the heart of the Riemann invasion force. The dropship carrying Cox and his team blended seamlessly into the swarm of Riemann vessels, approaching the massive flagship. As they neared their target, Cox activated a series of countermeasures, combining Riemann cloaking technology with human-designed signal jammers to mask their approach. "Stealth systems engaged," Cox announced, his voice barely audible over the low hum of the engines. "We're invisible to their sensors, but keep your eyes peeled for visual detection." The team watched in awe as the Supreme Commander's flagship loomed before them, its hull jam packed with weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. The sheer scale of the vessel dwarfed anything they had encountered before, making their mission seem even more daunting. Rodriguez leaned forward, studying the flagship's exterior. "There," he said, pointing to a section near the rear of the ship. "That hangar bay looks vulnerable. If we time it right, we can slip in through that gap in their defensive screen." Cox nodded, his hands steady on the controls as he maneuvered the dropship through the chaotic space around the flagship. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he threaded the needle between Raymond fighters and supply ships, exploiting a blind spot in the flagship's sensor coverage. With practiced precision, Cox guided their craft into a secluded corner of the hangar, hidden behind rows of alien fighters and towering supply crates. The team disembarked swiftly, their movements fluid and silent. The moment they stepped out of the dropship, an acrid smell assaulted their senses. Chen's eyes watered as he took in a breath of the alien atmosphere. Methane and sulfur compounds, Zarketh explained, his voice muffled by his breathing apparatus. The atmosphere here is tailored for Riemann physiology. Without hesitation, the super soldiers activated their specialized breathing equipment, allowing them to operate in the hostile environment without compromising their enhanced abilities. Cox took point, leading the team through the labyrinthine corridors of the flagship. They moved with preternatural speed and silence, their augmented muscles allowing them to scale maintenance shafts and crawl through narrow access tunnels to avoid detection. As they progressed deeper into the ship, the team encountered a heavily guarded security checkpoint. Riemann soldiers stood at attention, their weapons held at the ready. Chen stepped forward, pulling out a compact device from his pack. "Give me 2 minutes," he whispered, his fingers flying over the alien interface. True to his word, within moments, alarms began blaring in distant sections of the ship. The majority of the checkpoint's guards rushed off to investigate, leaving only a skeleton crew behind. Rodriguez nodded to the team. In a blur of motion, they struck. Enhanced strength and speed allowed them to neutralize the remaining Riemann defenders before they could even raise their weapons. As they pressed on, the corridors opened up into a massive central atrium. The team froze, taking in the sight before them. Hundreds of Riemann technicians and officers bustled about, coordinating the ongoing invasion of Earth. "This is the nerve center," Cox realized, his voice tight with the implications. "If we can disable this, we could cripple their entire war effort." Making a quick decision, Cox divided the team into 3 groups. "Chen, take your group and head for the main reactor. Plant those charges and be ready to blow it on my signal. Rodriguez, you're on weapons systems. Sabotage everything you can. I'll lead the assault on the command center." As the team split up, alarms began to blare throughout the ship. The Riemanns had detected the intruders, and security forces started to mobilize. Chen's group fought their way through waves of Riemann engineers and security personnel, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to dodge energy blasts and return fire with deadly accuracy. They reached the reactor room, a cavernous space dominated by a pulsing core of alien energy. "Plant the charges," Chen ordered, engaging in hand-to-hand combat with a Riemann engineer. "We need to be out of here in 5 minutes." Meanwhile, Rodriguez and his team infiltrated the weapons control center. They engaged in close-quarters combat with Riemann weapons officers, using their augmented strength to overpower the aliens. Once the room was secured, Rodriguez began the process of overloading the flagship's main gun. "This should put a dent in their offensive capabilities," he muttered, his fingers dancing over the alien controls. Cox's group encountered the stiffest resistance as they fought their way to the command center's outer defenses. They found themselves face-to-face with a new type of Riemann warrior, heavily augmented elite guards equipped with advanced power armor. These formidable opponents pushed the super soldiers to their limits. Cox ducked under a swipe from an energy blade, feeling the heat of the weapon as it passed inches from his face. He retaliated with a series of lightning-fast strikes, exploiting a weak point in the Raymond's armor. As the battle raged on multiple fronts within the flagship, Cox's group finally breached the outer defenses of the command center. They stood before the massive doors leading to the Supreme Commander's chamber, catching their breath and checking their weapons. Cox received urgent communications from Chen and Rodriguez. Both groups reported success in their objectives, but warned of heavy Raymond counterattacks converging on their positions. "We're out of time," Cox announced to his team. "Whatever happens next, we finish this here and now." With a nod to his fellow soldiers, Cox raised his weapon and prepared to breach the command center doors. The fate of humanity hung in the balance as they readied themselves for the final confrontation with the Riemann Supreme Commander. "Commander." As the doors slid open with a hiss, Cox and his team were met with a sight that took their breath away. The command chamber was a vast, circular room, its walls lined with pulsing alien technology that bathed everything in an eerie blue glow. At its center stood the Riemann Supreme Commander, a towering figure encased in ornate battle armor that gleamed with an otherworldly sheen. Surrounding him were his elite guards, their weapons raised and ready. For a split second, time seemed to stand still as both sides assessed each other. Then, without a word, the room erupted into chaos. Cox's team sprang into action, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to close the distance to their enemies in mere heartbeats. The air crackled with energy as Riemann weapons discharged, filling the room with a deadly light show. Ducking under a blast that scorched the air above his head, Cox rolled to his feet and engaged the nearest guard. His augmented strength allowed him to match the alien's superior physiology, trading blows that would have shattered normal human bones. As he fought, Cox's eyes darted around the room, taking in the tactical situation. His teammates were holding their own against the guards, their years of training and enhancements evening the odds against the superior alien technology. Then he saw it, a central control console near the Supreme Commander's position. Its design was different from the other technology in the room, more intricate and clearly of great importance. Cox's tactical mind immediately recognized it as the key to their mission. "Cover me!" he shouted to his team as he began fighting his way towards the console. His fellow soldiers responded instantly, adjusting their positions to provide Cox with a path through the melee. Energy blasts sizzled past him as he moved, the acrid smell of ozone filling his nostrils. As Cox neared the console, the Supreme Commander seemed to realize his intention. The alien leader disengaged from the battle with a grace that belied his massive size, moving to intercept Cox. Their eyes met across the chaotic battlefield, and Cox felt a chill run down his spine. The Supreme Commander's gaze held an intelligence and malevolence that was utterly inhuman. Before Cox could reach the console, the alien was upon him. The force of the Supreme Commander's first blow sent Cox flying across the room, his enhanced body absorbing an impact that would have killed a normal human instantly. Cox rolled to his feet, ignoring the sharp pain in his ribs. He barely had time to raise his arms before the Supreme Commander was on him again, the alien's advanced armor allowing it to move with impossible speed. The two engaged in a deadly dance, Cox's enhanced abilities pitted against the Supreme Commander's advanced technology. Each blow they exchanged sent shockwaves through the air, the raw power of their combat causing nearby equipment to short out and explode. As they fought, Cox could hear the sounds of battle raging around them. His team was still engaging the guards, the room filled with the cacophony of energy weapons and hand-to-hand combat. Suddenly, the entire ship lurched violently. Cox stumbled, nearly falling as the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. The charges Chen's team had planted must have detonated, he realized. Taking advantage of the momentary distraction, Cox disengaged from the Supreme Commander and made a desperate lunge for the control console. His fingers flew over the alien interface, his mind racing to recall the override codes they had prepared for this moment. The Supreme Commander roared in fury, charging towards Cox with murderous intent. But it was too late. With a final command, Cox activated the override sequence. The effect was immediate. All around them, systems began to shut down. The pulsing lights on the walls flickered and died, plunging the room into an eerie twilight. The constant hum of energy that had permeated the ship fell silent. The Supreme Commander reached Cox just as the override completed, smashing him away from the console with a backhanded blow. Cox hit the ground hard, his vision swimming from the impact. As he struggled to his feet, Cox saw the alien leader standing over the now dark console, its body language radiating fury and disbelief. The mighty flagship, the crown jewel of the Riemann invasion force, had been reduced to a powerless hulk floating in space. But their victory came at a cost. The ship's fail-safes, activated by the catastrophic system failure, began to kick in. Alarms blared throughout the vessel, their shrill cry a clear signal that the ship was tearing itself apart. "We need to move now," Cox shouted to his team, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and the sounds of combat. As if to emphasize his words, a massive tremor shook the ship, nearly knocking everyone off their feet. The artificial gravity continued to fluctuate wildly, making every movement a challenge. Cox's team disengaged from their battles, fighting their way towards the chamber's exit. The Riemann forces, their coordination shattered by the loss of the ship's systems, fell into disarray. As they reached the door, Cox turned for one last look at the command chamber. The Supreme Commander stood amid the chaos, its posture one of defiance even as the ship crumbled around it. Their eyes met once more, and Cox felt a chill at the promise of vengeance he saw there. Then they were through the door and into the corridors beyond, leaving the command chamber and its defeated leader behind. The real challenge now lay ahead, escaping the dying flagship and returning to Earth, where the final battle for humanity's survival awaited them. The ship's corridors became a maze of chaos as Cox and his team fought their way back to their entry point, dodging falling debris and bursts of escaping plasma. They reached their stolen Riemann shuttle just as another violent tremor shook the dying flagship. Cox took the controls, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to navigate the disintegrating hangar bay. The shuttle shot out into space, narrowly avoiding a massive chunk of the flagship's hull as it broke apart. As they sped away from the doomed vessel, the team watched through the view screen as the Riemann flagship imploded in a brilliant flash of light. The shockwave buffeted their small craft, but Cox's piloting skills kept them stable. "We did it," Chen breathed, his voice a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. But their victory was short-lived. As the shuttle descended towards Earth, they picked up multiple signals on their sensors. Riemann dropships, dozens of them, were heading for Fortress Alpha. "They're not giving up," Rodriguez growled, his hands tightening on his weapon. Cox's mind raced, quickly formulating a plan. "We can intercept them," he said, adjusting their course. "Hit them before they reach the fortress." The shuttle accelerated, pushing the alien craft to its limits. Cox executed a series of aggressive maneuvers, weaving through the formation of larger Riemann ships. Chen and Rodriguez manned the weapon systems, their enhanced reflexes allowing them to target with deadly precision. Energy blasts from their shuttle struck the engines and control surfaces of the Riemann dropships. Several veered off course, colliding with each other in spectacular explosions. Others spun out of control, plummeting towards the wilderness below. "We've thinned them out," Chen reported, his eyes never leaving the targeting system. "But a significant number are still on course for the fortress." Cox gritted his teeth, pushing the shuttle even harder. They managed to disrupt more of the Riemann formation. But it wasn't enough. As they approached Fortress Alpha, they could see the remaining dropships beginning their final descent. On the ground, the scene was one of frantic preparation. General Steele's voice crackled over their comms, coordinating the defense. Mothballed turrets whirred to life, their barrels tracking the incoming threats. Civilian vehicles, hastily repurposed as barricades, lined the perimeter. Cox landed their shuttle on the outskirts of the fortress, just as the first wave of Riemann dropships touched down. Without hesitation, the team disembarked, weapons at the ready. The air filled with the sound of energy weapons and explosions as the Riemann forces began their assault. Cox led his team in a flanking maneuver, catching a group of Riemann elites off guard. Their enhanced strength and speed allowed them to close the distance quickly, engaging the aliens in close combat. Chen and Rodriguez provided covering fire, their captured Riemann weapons cutting through the aliens' armor with ease. The super soldiers moved like a well-oiled machine, each anticipating the other's actions without need for verbal communication. As they fought, Cox noticed a change in the battle's dynamics. A massive shape unfolded from one of the larger dropships, towering over the battlefield. It was a Riemann war machine, its array of energy weapons and missile launchers already laying waste to human defensive positions. "New target," Cox called out, gesturing towards the mechanical behemoth. "We need to take that thing down." The team acknowledged, immediately adjusting their strategy. They used their enhanced agility to scale nearby structures, leaping from building to avoid the war machine's sweeping weapons fire. Chen's keen eyes spotted a weakness in the walker's armor plating. "There!" he shouted, pointing to a section near its joints. "Concentrate fire on that spot." The super soldiers focused their attacks, their weapons slowly but surely wearing down the war machine's defenses. As they fought, Cox noticed more human forces joining the fray. Experimental combat mechs, their movements unnaturally smooth and precise, engaged the Riemann infantry. Suddenly, a localized energy field flickered to life around a section of the fortress. Riemann energy weapons fired into it dissipated harmlessly. Cox realized Dr. Reeves must have made a breakthrough with the adapted shield technology. The tide of battle began to turn. Human forces, bolstered by the super soldiers' success and the new defensive measures, pushed back against the Riemann invaders. Cox and his team continued their assault on the war machine, using their enhanced strength to rip open maintenance panels and disable critical systems. With a deafening groan of stressed metal, the massive walker began to topple. "Clear the area!" Cox shouted, leading his team to safety as the war machine crashed to the ground, crushing several Riemann units beneath it. A cheer went up from the human forces, but Cox knew the battle was nowhere near the end. Even as they pressed their advantage, long-range sensors detected a new wave of Riemann ships entering Earth's atmosphere. As Cox surveyed the ongoing battle, weighing their options, his comm unit crackled to life. It was General Steele, his voice urgent. "Cox, we have a critical development, something that could change everything, but we need you and your team to make it happen." Cox's mind raced with the possibilities. Whatever the general had planned, it had to be significant. He gathered his team, preparing to hear what could be their most important mission yet. Cox's mind raced with possibilities as he acknowledged General Steele's communication. "Understood, sir. We're on our way." He turned to his team, their faces etched with exhaustion and persistence. "Let's move. The general's got something big." They sprinted through the chaos of the battlefield, dodging energy blasts and leaping over debris. As they approached the makeshift command post near Fortress Alpha's perimeter, Cox saw General Steele hunched over a holographic display, his face illuminated by its blue glow. "Cox, good. You're here," Steele said, his voice tense. He gestured to the display, which showed a complex schematic. "Our scientists have developed a prototype device. It's designed to disrupt Riemann neural networks on a massive scale." Chen leaned in, studying the schematic. "Sir, if this works, it could incapacitate their entire invasion force," Steele finished. "But there's a catch. The device needs to interface directly with a Riemann command ship to propagate its effects across their fleet." Cox's tactical mind immediately began formulating a plan. "We'll need to infiltrate their reinforcements," he said, pointing to the incoming wave of Riemann ships on the tactical display. "A small team using our captured shuttle." Steele nodded grimly. "It's high risk, but it might be our only shot. You have full authorization, Cox. Whatever you need." Cox turned to his team. "Chen, Rodriguez, you're with me. The rest of you stay here and bolster the fortress defenses." As they moved to prepare, Dr. Reeves approached, carrying a sleek, alien-looking device. "This is the neural disruptor prototype," she explained, handing it to Cox. "We've done our best to integrate it with Riemann tech, but you'll need to interface it directly with their command systems." Cox secured the device, feeling the weight of their mission. "Understood, Doctor. We won't let you down." Minutes later, Cox, Chen, and Rodriguez were aboard their captured Riemann shuttle. The craft had been hastily retrofitted with the neural disruptor, its alien circuitry pulsing with an eerie light. As they launched from Fortress Alpha, the battle raged around them. Energy weapons crisscrossed the sky, and explosions bloomed in the distance. Cox piloted the shuttle with practiced ease, using the chaos as cover for their ascent. "Activating captured identification codes," Chen reported from the co-pilot's seat. "Let's hope they still work." The shuttle climbed higher, leaving the immediate battle behind. As they approached the incoming Riemann fleet, Cox's hands tightened on the controls. "This is it. Stay sharp." They slipped into formation with the alien reinforcements, the stolen codes allowing them to blend in. For a moment, it seemed their ruse would hold. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the shuttle. Rodriguez cursed from his station. "They've flagged us! Looks like they upgraded their systems after we took out their flagship." Cox's mind raced. Their stealth approach was blown, but they were too close to turn back now. "Hang on!" he shouted, yanking the controls hard. The shuttle broke formation, diving and weaving as energy blasts erupted around them. Chen and Rodriguez manned the defensive systems, returning fire with precision born of their enhanced reflexes. "We need to get closer to that command ship," Cox called out, spotting their target amid the chaos of the Riemann fleet. He pushed the shuttle to its limits, executing a series of maneuvers that would have torn a human pilot apart. As they neared the massive alien vessel, Cox's comm crackled with an incoming transmission from Fortress Alpha. Dr. Reeves's voice came through, tense and urgent. Cox, we're detecting a massive energy buildup from the Raymond command ship. They're preparing to unleash some kind of gravitational weapon. If they succeed, it could destabilize Earth's tectonic plates. Cox's eyes hardened. They were out of time and options. Chen, Rodriguez, prep for space combat. We're going in hard. He plotted a collision course with the Raymond command ship, aiming for a vulnerable point near its engine nacelles. As they hurtled towards their target, Chen and Rodriguez donned their specialized exosuits, designed for the harsh conditions of space. "Brace for impact," Cox shouted. Seconds before collision, they ejected from the shuttle. The unmanned craft slammed into the Raymond ship, its momentum carrying it deep into the alien vessel's superstructure. The resulting explosion tore a gaping hole in the command ship's hull. Cox, Chen, and Rodriguez activated their suit's propulsion systems, guiding themselves through the breach. As they entered the decompressing corridors of the Raymond ship, artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Alien crew members were sucked into the vacuum of space, while others scrambled to seal off compartments. The super soldiers fought their way deeper into the ship, their enhanced physiology allowing them to withstand the brutal conditions. They encountered fierce resistance from Raymond security forces, engaging in close-quarters combat amid failing systems and bursting conduits. As they neared the ship's central control room, Cox's comm lit up again. General Steele's voice came through, tight with tension. "Cox, our sensors indicate the Raymond weapon is nearly charged. You have less than 10 minutes before it reaches full capacity." Cox acknowledged the transmission, his mind focused on their objective. They reached a massive set of doors, clearly the entrance to the control room. Chen placed breaching charges, while Rodriguez provided cover fire against the approaching Raymond forces. The charges detonated, blowing the doors inward. Cox led the charge into the control room, the neural disruptor device clutched in his hand. As they engaged the Raymond command staff in a desperate firefight, Cox scanned the room for a suitable interface point. Time was running out. Earth's fate hung in the balance as Cox and his team fought to activate the neural disruptor and neutralize the Raymond threat once and for all. As Cox's hand reached for the interface point, a searing blast of energy struck the console mere inches from his fingers. He whirled to face a new threat, the Raymond ship's commander, a towering figure encased in sleek battle armor. Cox barely had time to register the alien's presence before it charged, its massive form barreling towards him with shocking speed. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the commander's grasp. The Raymond's momentum carried it into the damaged console, sending sparks flying. "Chen, Rodriguez, keep them off me!" Cox shouted, engaging the commander in close combat. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to duck and weave around the alien's powerful swings, but each blow that connected sent shockwaves through his body. Chen and Rodriguez responded instantly, their weapons blazing as they held back the waves of Raymond reinforcements flooding into the control room. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and burning circuitry as energy blasts crisscrossed the chamber. Cox used his agility to his advantage, darting around the hulking Raymond commander. He landed a series of quick strikes to vulnerable joints in the alien's armor, but the commander seemed to shrug off the attacks. In retaliation, it swept its arm in a wide arc, catching Cox in the midsection and sending him flying across the room. He slammed into a bank of alien computers, the impact knocking the wind from his lungs. Through blurred vision, Cox saw Chen making progress with the neural disruptor. His teammates' fingers flew over the alien interface, his enhanced cognitive abilities allowing him to decipher the complex systems at an astonishing rate. Rodriguez held their defensive line single-handedly, his superhuman endurance pushed to its limits. His captured Raymond weapon spat continuous fire, cutting down alien after alien as they attempted to breach the control room. Cox forced himself to his feet, ignoring the pain that lanced through his body. The Raymond commander advanced on him, its alien features twisted in what Cox assumed was a grimace of rage. He glanced at the countdown displayed on a nearby screen. Less than a minute remained before the gravitational weapon reached full power. Time seemed to slow as Cox's enhanced mind rapidly assessed the situation. In that fraction of a second, he formulated a plan. He feinted to the left, then ducked under the commander's grasping arms. Using the alien's own momentum against it, Cox grappled with the massive form, redirecting its charge. They careened across the control room, smashing through delicate equipment. Cox strained every enhanced muscle in his body, guiding their trajectory towards a specific target, the main power conduit he had spotted earlier. At the last possible moment, Cox disengaged. The Raymond commander, unable to stop its forward motion, crashed into the conduit. A massive surge of energy coursed through its armor, the alien's body convulsing as systems overloaded. Cox wasted no time. He sprinted to Chen's side, adding his own expertise to the task of integrating the neural disruptor. Their hands moved in perfect synchronization, enhanced reflexes allowing them to work at an inhuman pace. 10 seconds, Rodriguez called out, his voice strained as he continued to hold off the Raymond forces. Cox and Chen redoubled their efforts. Sweat beaded on their brows as they raced against time. With a final, decisive movement, Cox slammed his palm onto the activation panel. A pulse of energy surged through the ship, so powerful that Cox felt it in his bones. The Raymond reinforcements at the door suddenly stumbled, their coordinated attack falling into disarray. Through the control room's viewing port, Cox watched as the effect spread to the rest of the fleet. Ships began to drift aimlessly, their crews incapacitated by the neural disruption. On the tactical display, Cox saw the gravitational weapons targeting system go haywire. The massive energy beam lanced out into space, missing Earth entirely, and instead striking several disabled Raymond vessels. The resulting explosion lit up the orbital theater like a new sun. "We did it," Chen breathed, allowing himself a moment of relief. Cox nodded grimly. "Not over yet. We need to get out of here." They regrouped quickly, fighting their way through the confusion of disorientated Raymond forces. Cox led them to the hangar bay, where they commandeered a Raymond shuttle. As Chen prepped the unfamiliar craft for launch, Cox received a transmission from General Steele confirming that the ground forces were in full retreat. The shuttle blasted out of the hangar, weaving through the debris field of damaged Raymond ships. As they began their descent towards Earth, Cox's enhanced senses picked up an anomalous energy reading. He focused on the source, the Raymond command ship they had just escaped. "New problem," he announced, his voice tight. "The command ship's reactor is destabilizing. If it goes critical this close to Earth..." Chen and Rodriguez understood immediately. The explosion could devastate the planet's surface, turning their hard-won victory into ash. Cox set his jaw, making a decision. "Looks like we're not done yet. We're going back in." He banked the shuttle hard, turning back towards the looming threat of the destabilizing Raymond command ship. As they approached, the vessel's hull began to glow an ominous red, a testament to the chaos building within its core. The super soldiers knew that neutralizing this final threat would push their enhanced abilities to the absolute limit, and perhaps beyond. Beyond it. As they accelerated towards the massive alien vessel, its hull pulsed with an ominous red glow, a clear sign of the chaos building within its core. "ETA 2 minutes, Cox announced, his hands dancing over the shuttle's controls. "Chen, what's our plan?" Chen's eyes darted across the shuttle's sensor readings. "We need to get to the main reactor chamber. If we can initiate a controlled shutdown sequence, we might be able to prevent a catastrophic meltdown." Rodriguez checked his weapon. "And if we can't?" "Then we improvise," Cox replied grimly. As they closed in on the Raymond command ship, a barrage of energy blasts suddenly erupted from its surface. Cox's enhanced reflexes kicked in as he jerked the shuttle into a series of evasive maneuvers. "Looks like some of our Raymond friends have shaken off the neural disruptor," Chen called out, returning fire with the shuttle's weapons. Cox weaved through the deadly light show, his augmented mind calculating trajectories and safe paths faster than any normal human could comprehend. A near miss rocked the shuttle, sending sparks cascading from a damaged console. "There!" Rodriguez shouted, pointing to a gaping hole in the ship's hull, the remnants of their earlier assault. "We can use that as our entry point." Cox nodded, angling the shuttle towards the breach. As they approached, he called out, "Brace for impact!" The shuttle screeched against twisted metal as Cox guided it into the damaged hangar bay. They came to a jarring halt, the shuttle's hull groaning under the strain. Before the echo of their landing had faded, the team was moving. They burst from the shuttle, immediately met by a hail of Riemann weapon fire. Cox dove behind a chunk of debris, feeling the heat of an energy blast as it passed inches from his face. "Push forward," he ordered, returning fire with precision. The super soldiers moved like a well-oiled machine, their enhanced abilities allowing them to outmaneuver and outfight the Riemann defenders. Chen vaulted over a barricade, his boot connecting with an alien's face before he even landed. Rodriguez provided covering fire, his shots finding their marks with unerring accuracy. As they fought their way deeper into the ship, the deck beneath their feet began to shift unpredictably. Cox stumbled as artificial gravity fluctuated, nearly sending him floating towards the ceiling. "Gravity systems are failing," Chen noted, using the sudden weightlessness to launch himself at a group of Riemann soldiers. His momentum carried him into their midst, scattering them like bowling pins. The team adapted quickly, using the erratic gravitational fields to their advantage. They bounded off walls and ceilings, striking from unexpected angles and confounding their alien adversaries. As they neared the central engineering section, resistance intensified. A massive blast door blocked their path, its surface scarred by their earlier assault on the ship. "Rodriguez, can you get us through?" Cox asked, laying down suppressing fire as more Riemann troops converged on their position. Rodriguez examined the door's control panel, his enhanced mind rapidly processing the alien symbols. "Give me 30 seconds. Those seconds stretched as Cox and Chen held off wave after wave of Raman attackers. Just as their position was about to be overrun, Rodriguez called out, "Got it!" The blast door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the cavernous reactor chamber beyond. The team surged forward, only to be met by a new threat. A towering Riemann, its armor more elaborate than the others, stood at the chamber's center. Around it hovered a swarm of sleek, deadly-looking drones. "The chief engineer," Chen muttered, recognizing the alien's insignia. The Riemann barked an order in its guttural language, and the drones sprang into action. They zipped through the air with incredible speed, energy weapons charging. "Split up," Cox commanded. "Chen, see if you can hack one of those drones. Rodriguez, start working on shutting down the reactor. I'll keep our friend busy." The team scattered as the drones opened fire. Cox charged straight at the Riemann engineer, dodging blasts from its personal weapon. He engaged the alien in close combat, his enhanced strength allowing him to match the Riemann's superior size. Chen ducked and weaved through the swarm of drones, searching for an opening. His cybernetic implants interfaced with his suit's systems, probing for weaknesses in the drone's defenses. Finally, he found a vulnerability. With a triumphant grin, he seized control of one of the drones, turning it against its companions. Rodriguez fought his way to the main reactor control console, his fingers flying over the alien interface. "Cox!" he shouted over the din of battle. "The shutdown sequence requires simultaneous input from multiple stations." Cox grunted as he absorbed a powerful blow from the Riemann engineer. "Understood. On my mark, we make for the other consoles." The battle raged on, a frantic dance of superhuman reflexes and alien technology. Chen's hacked drone provided crucial support, its weapons fire keeping the other drones at bay. Cox finally gained the upper hand against the Riemann engineer, a well-placed strike sending the alien crashing into a bank of equipment. "Now!" Cox yelled. The super soldiers moved with perfect synchronization, each sprinting for a different console. They vaulted over obstacles, twisted past energy blasts, and input complex sequences with inhuman speed. As the final command was entered, the reactor's angry red glow began to fade. For a moment, it seemed they had succeeded. Then, a new alarm blared through the chamber. The ship shuddered violently, and entire sections began to tear away from the main structure. "The shutdown triggered some kind of failsafe," Chen shouted, his eyes wide as he read the warning messages flashing across the nearest screen. "Time to go," Cox stated flatly, already moving towards the exit. They fought their way back through the disintegrating ship, leaping over widening chasms and ducking under collapsing bulkheads. Their enhanced physiology allowed them to withstand the extreme conditions as they passed through areas exposed to the vacuum of space. When they finally reached the hangar bay, They found their shuttle crushed beneath a fallen support beam. There! Rodriguez pointed to a larger Raymond transport ship on the far side of the hangar. It's our only shot. As they sprinted for the alien vessel, the hangar's outer doors began to buckle. The void of space beckoned beyond, promising a quick death if they didn't move fast enough. Cox reached the transport first, slapping the entry controls. As the ramp lowered, he turned back to his team. "Let's hope flying this thing is as easy as the shuttle," he said, a grim smile on his face. They boarded just as the hangar doors gave way. The sudden decompression sucked debris past them as Cox wrestled with the unfamiliar controls. The transport's engines roared to life, and they shot out of the disintegrating Remen ship mere moments before it was consumed in a massive explosion. The shockwave caught them, sending the transport tumbling through space. Cox fought for control, his enhanced senses working overtime to stabilize their flight path. As Earth's atmosphere loomed before them, new alarms began to sound throughout the transport's cabin. The ship, already damaged from their harrowing escape, was not designed for atmospheric entry. As they began their descent, the hull began to glow red-hot, and warning lights flashed across every console. Cox exchanged a look with his teammates. They had come too far to fail now. With steadfast perseverance, they prepared to face their final challenge, landing a failing alien ship on their home planet, with the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. Balance. The transport's hull groaned under the immense stress, panels buckling and tearing away as they plummeted through Earth's atmosphere. "We're losing structural integrity," Chen shouted over the deafening roar of superheated air, rushing past their failing craft. Cox's mind raced, analyzing their dire situation with superhuman speed. His enhanced vision spotted a section of the hull that seemed more resilient than the rest. "There," he pointed, "that piece could work as a heat shield. We need to detach it now." Without hesitation, the team sprang into action. Rodriguez used his augmented strength to pry open a maintenance hatch, exposing the ship's inner workings. Chen's cybernetically enhanced hands moved in a blur, severing connections and rerouting power to maintain life support in their chosen section. Cox braced himself against the violent shaking of the ship and began tearing through the metal and circuitry, separating them from their makeshift heat shield. His muscles strained against their limits, enhanced fibers tearing and instantly regenerating as he pushed himself beyond normal human capabilities. With a final wrenching effort, the team freed the section of hull. "Brace yourselves," Cox yelled as the rest of the transport disintegrated around them. They positioned themselves behind the improvised shield, feeling the intense heat even through their advanced combat suits. Cox took point, using his heightened spatial awareness to make crucial adjustments to their trajectory. His eyes darted between the rapidly approaching Earth and the glowing edges of their shield, calculating wind resistance and optimal angles of descent. "Aim for the water," Chen called out, gesturing towards a large body of water, visible through the fiery maelstrom surrounding them. Cox nodded, shifting their position slightly. The shield began to glow white-hot, the heat threatening to overcome even their enhanced tolerance. Rodriguez and Chen pressed themselves against the back of the shield, their augmented muscles tensing in preparation for impact. They struck the ocean's surface with tremendous force, the shock of impact reverberating through their bodies. The makeshift craft skipped across the water like a stone, each impact threatening to tear their shelter apart. Cox gritted his teeth, fighting to maintain their position as they ricocheted across the waves. Finally, their momentum spent, they came to rest bobbing in the choppy sea. The super soldiers emerged from behind their battered shield, battered but alive. Their enhanced physiology had allowed them to withstand forces that would have pulverized ordinary humans. As they treaded water, the sound of engines drew their attention. A naval vessel, part of Earth's coastal defense fleet, was rapidly approaching their position. Cox raised a hand, signaling their location. Within minutes, they were hauled aboard the ship. The crew stared in awe at the three super soldiers, their combat suits scorched and torn, but their bodies largely unscathed. "Someone get me a secure line to command," Cox ordered, his voice hoarse but unwavering. A communications officer quickly provided him with the encrypted device. Cox input a series of codes, and General Steele's face appeared on the small screen. "Cox," the general's relief was palpable, even through the grainy image. Good to see you made it, but I'm afraid this fight isn't over yet. Cox's eyes narrowed. What's the situation, sir? The bulk of the Riemann invasion force has been defeated, Steele explained, his expression grim. But we're detecting a final wave of ships approaching Earth. It looks like a last-ditch effort to salvage their failed invasion. Without hesitation, Cox responded, We're ready for deployment, sir. Where do you need us? Fortress Alpha, Steele replied. Dr. Reeves has some new toys for you. We're going to need every advantage we can get. The naval vessel changed course, pushing its engines to the limit as it raced towards the nearest military airfield. Within the hour, Cox, Chen, and Rodriguez found themselves aboard a hypersonic transport streaking towards Fortress Alpha. As they approached the fortified complex, they saw signs of the recent battle, scorch marks on the reinforced walls, debris scattered across the landing pads. But the facility was a hive of activity, preparing for the coming fight. Dr. Reeves met them as they disembarked, her eyes bright with a mix of concern and excitement. Follow me, she said without preamble. We've got something that might give us an edge. She led them to a secure lab deep within the fortress. As the doors slid open, the super soldiers saw a row of sleek, advanced exosuits. Unlike anything they had used before, these suits seemed to pulse with awe-inspiring energy. We've reverse-engineered some of the Riemann technology, Dr. Reeves explained, running her hand along one of the suits. Combined with what we've learned from your own enhanced abilities, these should amplify your capabilities beyond anything we've seen before. Cox stepped forward, placing his hand on the chest plate of the nearest suit. He felt a slight vibration, as if the suit were responding to his presence. How long do we have to learn these systems? He asked. A technician monitoring a bank of screens called out, The Raymond fleet will enter Earth's atmosphere in less than an hour, sir. Cox exchanged glances with Chen and Rodriguez. They nodded in unison, a silent agreement passing between them. Then we'd better suit up, Cox said, his voice filled with grit. It's time to end this. As the team began to don their new exosuits, alarms blared throughout the fortress. The final battle for Earth was about to begin, and humanity's fate would rest on the shoulders of its enhanced defenders.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.